Chapter 398. Why is that? Changshi didn't understand. When Imperial concubine Shui was dying, Emperor Cheng drove everyone out, so he held Gong Yimo and guarded outside the door. He didn't know what Imperial concubine Shui said. Emperor Cheng shook his head. Shui Lian didn't say anything. She just wanted me to agree. She also wanted me to expel all the people in Daiyu State who weren't assimilated. I did that. Since the emperor said so, Changshi didn't ask anymore, because as long as Imperial concubine Shui said it, His Majesty will definitely do it. Thinking of this, he felt a little regretful. He really felt that if Shui country really had a treasure, the person who could find it must be the princess. Emperor Cheng thought of the past and fell into deep thought. Imperial concubine Shui was hiding something from him. He knew very well that she would rather die than give birth to Immerse. It wasn't just because of maternal love. The child in her belly was different. She seemed to know it from the beginning. Later, after Immerse was born, her performance was mediocre, so he slowly let down his guard. Otherwise, he would have thought that the Shui family did something to the child. Later, when Shui Lian died, he didn't care about Immerse, so Immerse stayed in the cold palace for 4 years. Later, when she appeared, Emperor Qing couldn't help but like her, but at the same time, he was also deeply guarded against her. It's just that time reveals a person's heart. Everyone in this world may have bad intentions, but Immerse wasn't. Her heart was bright and broad, and she couldn't tolerate any evil. There was no hatred in her eyes. Her human nature was righteous. This was also why he liked her more and more. She was a very good child, and she deserved the best in the world. Changshi was also a little absent-minded. Should he say it? If he said it, with His Majesty's importance to the princess and the prince, he didn't know how sad he would be. And with His Majesty's thoughts, he might do something extreme. But if he didn't say it, would it be good to let them go on like this? When he thought of Gong Yimo's concern for His Majesty, her natural worry, and every time she would seriously call him, Eunuch Changshi, her attitude was very respectful. Changshi's heart, he couldn't be ruthless. He was loyal to His Majesty. This would never change. But if he really talked about this matter, it wouldn't cause any harm to Daiyu State or His Majesty. Instead, it would cause a big uproar. Since it was like this, pretend he didn't know. As the days passed, Gong Yimo's letters flew out like snowflakes. She not only asked Lu Yi and Yu Heng for help, but also the crown prince. Of course, the main one was Gong Ju. His? T? His? T-T? T? T? T-T-T-S. T-T? T-T? I. Yui. He had so many subordinates, so she had to make good use of them. But while she was busy, the empress called her to attend a banquet. The emperor had just recovered from his illness, so the palace should be lively, but there was no need to do this every 2 or 3 days, right? Gong Yimo asked the palace maids to dress her up. Then she went to Feng Chi Palace. Although it was almost July, the weather wasn't very hot. Gong Yimo wore a light green gauze dress and politely tied her hair into a simple bun. Actually, if it were up to her, she would rather tie her hair in a ponytail. There was a small garden in Feng Chi Palace, which was planted with rare species that Gong Che had collected from all over the years. They were colorful all year round, and now was the time when they bloomed the brightest. From afar, a woman's laughter could be heard. Gong Yimo straightened her dress and walked in with her people. Seeing Gong Yimo come, the empress was naturally overjoyed. She believed that with the relationship between Immerse and Che, Immerse wouldn't forget about Che when she went out to sea in the future. So she quickly waved at her, indicating for her to sit by her side. Seeing Gong Yimo come, many of the noble ladies present were a little timid, but they had already seen Gong Yimo once a few days ago. She was very amiable throughout the whole process, and she was very simple and didn't put on any airs. So this time, they all boldly approached and sat around the empress' seat. Some of them hadn't seen Gong Yimo before, so they wanted to take a good look at her and see if she was similar to what they had imagined. Immerse, look, they all like you very much. In the future, you should come out and walk around more. I haven't seen you leave the palace since you came back. Gong Yimo smiled and glanced at Su Miaolon, who had been avoiding her since she came in, and said softly, Imperial Mother is right. In the future, this son will definitely come out and walk around more. Only then was the Empress satisfied. Thinking of something, she pointed at Su Miaolon and said, "This is your sister-in-law. She's getting married in a few days. Originally, she shouldn't be going out now, but this child misses me and is filial. Immerse, you should also meet her." Gong Yimo looked at Su Miaolon and called her sister-in-law with a grin. Now that she faced Su Miaolon again, she was completely at ease. Although there was a grudge in her heart, she was just like Gong Dai and Gong Che. If they didn't do anything to hurt her, she had no reason to hold a grudge against them. It was too tiring. Hearing her call her sister-in-law, Su Miaolon hurriedly responded, but her eyes were still evasive. Those who didn't know would think that Gong Yimo had bullied her before. Gong Yimo smiled calmly and didn't deny it, because they weren't on the same level and couldn't be her opponent. However, Su Miaolon's expression was seen by her close friends. They thought Princess Gu must have bullied Sister Miaolon before. Otherwise, Sister Miaolon wouldn't show a frightened expression every time they talked about her and tell them to stop talking about her. That girl looked at Gong Yimo and thought she wasn't that scary. What's wrong with being a princess? Can a princess be unreasonable? She pushed Su Miaolon. "Sister, didn't you say that you have a gift for the Empress?" Hearing this, Su Miaolon glanced at her with a smile. "Yes, I almost forgot." "Thank you." Being praised, the girl was rather embarrassed. Then, she looked at Gong Yimo with some pride. She believed that once Sister Miaolon took out her gift, it would definitely overshadow this princess's limelight. The Empress was interested when she heard this, but she still said, "Child, we're going to be a family soon. Why are you still so polite?" Su Miaolon blushed. This is just a token of Miaolon's sincerity. As she spoke, she handed the box over. The Empress opened it and saw that it was a pair of purple pearl earrings. They shone brilliantly, exquisitely, and beautifully. These purple pearls were hard to come by, and such a beautiful purple color was even rarer. At this moment, someone said, "Ah, this is Master Bodhi's work. He only makes one piece of jewelry a year. Sister Miaolon is so thoughtful." Gong Yimo glanced at them and didn't comment. However, the others around her were already praising it. Master Bodhi's work was indeed rare. No wonder they were so excited. At this moment, Su Miaolon glanced at Gong Yimo and said with a smile, "Master Bodhi has some connections with my mother. Another day, I'll have Master Bodhi make one for the princess. I didn't know that the princess would come today. My apologies." At this moment, everyone noticed that although Gong Yimo was a princess, she only wore a single piece of jewelry on her head. It was extremely plain. Chapter 400. When the Crown Prince had returned, he had gifted her Cloud Orchid Brocade and the Empress Cloud Flower Brocade. These were the third and second best brocades in the Yuhan Kingdom. At that time, she had thought that this was the limit. After all, the number one Cloud Sky Brocade was something that even the Emperor of the Yuhan Kingdom did not have many bolts of. Moreover, at that time, the two kingdoms had yet to establish trade relations. However, who knew that it was not that the Crown Prince did not obtain the Cloud Sky Brocade. Instead, he had kept it and directly gifted it to Gong Yimo. How could she not be jealous? She was the Crown Prince's soon-to-be wife. However, the Crown Prince treated her, his wife, worse than his half-sister. She could not accept this. She could not accept this. At this moment, everyone was surrounding Gong Yimo and asking her all sorts of questions with an envious look on their faces. Gong Yimo sighed in her heart. Those things were all gifts from other people. She still had 7 or 8 pieces of jewelry that were also from the hands of Brocade Master. They were either gifts from Gong Dai or Kim Yun. She did not think that they were rare. She only knew that Brocade Master had a great reputation. However, when she saw how eager these noble ladies were, she realized how great Brocade Master's reputation was. When the girl beside Su Miaolon saw that Su Miaolon's limelight had been stolen, she could not help but speak up in dissatisfaction. Sister Miaolon wanted to gift this purple pearl earring to Her Highness the moment she received it. The princess has just returned from a long journey. She must have also brought a gift for Her Highness, right? Why not take it out and let us broaden our horizons? She was saying that Gong Yimo was unfilial. She had hidden good things for herself, unlike Su Miaolon, who eagerly offered them out. Gong Yimo looked at the girl who had repeatedly caused trouble for her. Her heavy gaze lightly swept over her. The girl felt as if she had been scraped by something sharp. Her little thoughts seemed to have been seen through by Gong Yimo. She was immediately speechless and did not dare to say anything. Therefore, they were not on the same level. If it was a few years ago, Gong Yimo might have been in the mood to flirt with these girls. However, she simply could not bring herself to do so now. Seeing that the girl had quieted down, Gong Yimo directly took out a brocade box from her bosom and opened it. Unexpectedly, it was a seemingly ordinary white jade bracelet. Gong Yimo did not have any patterns on it, but everyone felt that this thing was definitely extraordinary. Gong Yimo did not have any ordinary items. Sure enough, as everyone expected, after the white jade bracelet was taken out, there was actually a projection of a phoenix's tail on the ground under the sunlight. This was also brocade master's work. Everyone was doubtful. Could it be that the works of Jin Shio Grandmaster have become so worthless? Why did Gong Yimo take out two pieces at once? They were still in shock. Gong Yimo handed the bracelet to the Empress and gently smiled. It's not anything good. It's mainly a token of my appreciation. Imperial Mother, please don't dislike it. At this time, someone could not help but laugh. Gong Yimo took out brocade master's work, but her attitude was very casual. She only used it to express her appreciation. As for Su Miaolon, it was as if she had never seen anything good before. After receiving Master Bodhi's work, she eagerly brought them here to present it. Therefore, a princess was a princess. Her bearing and vision were far from ordinary women. Some people thought that after becoming the crown prince's imperial concubine, they would reach the heavens in a single bound. Unexpectedly, they were still so petty. This laugh made Su Miaolon feel as if she had been slapped in the face. Her face burned red. The Empress saw that she had the intention to help and said with a smile, "Good, good. Every one of you is a good child. Whether it's a bracelet or an earring, I like them very much. Reward them." As she spoke, the Empress bestowed many things. Although people were envious, they gradually did not mention this matter again. At this time, someone suddenly shouted, "The Crown Prince has arrived." Hearing this voice, everyone was surprised and excited. Now that the Crown Prince's position was stable, he was gentle and rich. It could be said that he was the dream partner in the hearts of all the noble ladies in the capital. Even if they married him as a concubine or even a concubine when the Crown Prince ascended the throne, they would still have the honor of being an imperial concubine. What's more, it was said that the Crown Prince kept his chastity for the Crown Prince's imperial concubine and did not have a single woman by his side. They all had a chance. Sister Miaolon, did His Highness the Crown Prince come to see you? Usually, the Crown Prince never attends private banquets. Someone happily whispered in Su Miaolon's ear. Su Miaolon shyly lowered her head and heard the Crown Prince greeting the Empress. Immediately after, the noble ladies tenderly greeted him. Gong Che smiled and said that they were excused. However, his gaze involuntarily fell on Gong Yimo's body. At first glance, he was stunned. He discovered that Gong Yimo was actually so beautiful with her hair down. She was so beautiful that it was soul-stirring, and the clothes she was wearing were made from the material he had given her. Thinking of this, his gaze became more fervent, and he directly sat next to Gong Yimo. There was nothing wrong with him sitting there. After all, Gong Yimo and he were of equal status. Only she had the qualifications to sit next to the Crown Prince and not below him. Thus, everyone discovered that the two of them sitting together were actually so compatible that Su Miaolon was directly compared to the dust. The Empress said with some surprise, "My son, why are you here?" Gong Che said without hesitation, "This son is here to find Immerse. There are some problems on the ship that I need Immerse's help to solve." Hearing that it was serious business, the Empress definitely wouldn't stop him. Instead, she lovingly looked at Gong Yimo. In that case, I've troubled a mower. Che, you too. It's rare for a mower to come out, but you snatch her away before she even had a chance. Gong Yimo hurriedly smiled. Let's meet again next time. Then, Imperial Mother, this son will leave first? She really couldn't sit through this boring banquet. The Empress smiled. Go ahead. During this conversation, Gong Che actually didn't even look at Su Miaolon. Many people noticed this and looked at Su Miaolon with some evil intentions. Only then did the Empress realize that something was wrong and said, Che, wait. This child, why didn't you say goodbye to your wife before leaving? Gong Che finally glanced at Su Miaolon, but it was only a glance before he looked away. Imperial Mother, business is more important. This son won't accompany you any longer. After saying that, he pulled Gong Yimo and left. Su Miaolon's face was cold as she tore her handkerchief. The Empress also realized something and asked, Miaolon, did something happen between the two of you? Hearing this, Su Miaolon shook her head. Imperial Mother is overthinking. The wedding is imminent. What could happen? Crown Prince Gij's business is more important. It's fine. However, the Empress still felt strange. On the other side, Gong Yimo also asked, Crown Prince Gij, why are you so cold to Su Miaolon? Isn't she your daughter-in-law? Speaking of this, Gong Che couldn't help but glare at the little minx beside him. He sighed and didn't answer. In the past 6 months, he had discussed with the Marquis that he had no interest in Su Miaolon and wanted to break off the marriage. Of course, when the time came, he would push all the blame onto himself and find a suitable husband for Su Miaolon. At first, the Marquis didn't agree. Later, under the drive of benefits, he agreed. However, this matter somehow spread to Su Miaolon's ears. In order to marry him, she actually drugged him and almost lost her virginity to him before the wedding. As a result, there was no other way. This marriage he couldn't refuse. Chapter 401. Although no one knew about this, Su Miaolon had already sacrificed her reputation. If she didn't marry him, she wouldn't be able to marry the people that Gong Che had arranged for her. The Marquis, who loved his daughter dearly, had no choice but to put pressure on him. This made Gong Che very angry. Originally, he had married Su Miaolon as a stopgap measure. Later, when Su Miaolon was in mourning, she had bought him 3 years. Now that the Daiyu state was stable, he didn't need Su Miaolon anymore. What he needed now was a woman who was easier to control. However, seeing that she had sacrificed a few years of her youth, he had given her generous compensation and arranged an excellent escape route for her. He didn't expect her to do that. Gong Che sneered. Forget it. He was going to get married anyway. Since Su Miaolon wanted to marry him so badly and rejected all escape routes, what else could he say? However, he didn't know if she could bear the consequences. Seeing Gong Che's fierce eyes, Gong Yimo obediently shut her mouth. On the other hand, Gong Che realized that he had been too fierce just now, so he told her some of the things that Su Miaolon had done. Gong Yimo was slightly speechless. You want to marry her to Shun Shiyi? Also, it's been half a year. Why hasn't Shun Shiyi gotten married yet? Gong Che was very unhappy when he heard her mention another man's name. Shun Shiyi used to like Su Miaolon. Isn't it good for them to be together? With Shun Shiyi's current family background, Su Miaolon can be considered to be climbing up the social ladder. Gong Yimo was still in shock. It seems that Su Miaolon really loves you. She actually drugged you and even called her parents to catch you in the act. Really? You have to treat her well? Gong Che was speechless. He really wanted to strangle the little vixen in front of him. Gong Yimo also knew that when Gong Che chose Su Miaolon, it was probably because she rejected him. He was too sad, so he casually found someone else. But now that things had come to this, if he wanted to marry her, then so be it. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens? As the two of them chatted, they went directly to the shipyard. It was located by the Soaring Dragon River in Beijing. This shipyard belonged to the royal family of Daiyu State, so it was very large. When they saw Gong Yimo arrive, they all came up to pay their respects. They had long heard that the Gu Princess had made a heaven-shaking giant ship. Back when the canal was first opened, that giant ship was already able to travel smoothly. It was clear how light it was and how extraordinary its craftsmanship was. More importantly, the people from Gong Yimo's shipyard at Hungza Lake had also come. For so long, they had only seen her and not seen her. After not seeing her for a few years, they were very excited to see her. Gong Yimo was also very happy to see an acquaintance. After chatting for a while, the people from the shipyard brought Gong Yimo around and asked her to give them some pointers. Gong Yimo looked at the modern shipyard in front of her and knew that it had been improved, but there were still some areas that were not perfect. She told them some of the basic knowledge she knew. However, he didn't mention the advanced craftsmanship to avoid causing trouble. Even so, those people felt that they had benefited a lot. They praised Gong Yimo for being knowledgeable and multi-talented, which made her feel a little embarrassed. While they were chatting in full swing, Su Miaolon came over as soon as she left the palace. She had long found out where the crown prince would go, so she hurried over. She felt that the crown prince had misunderstood her, and she had to clear things up with him. She did that without even caring about her reputation because she loved him too much. Could it be that he couldn't feel her feelings? It was already late, but the shipyard was still very lively. After everyone finished chatting, they saw that it was time for dinner. Gong Yimo's former subordinates warmly invited Gong Yimo to stay for dinner. The other people in the shipyard also looked forward to it. Gong Yimo had no choice but to stay. Those former subordinates were fine, but the people from the Soaring Dragon shipyard were very excited when they saw that Princess Gong Yimo didn't dislike them and even ate with them. So, one by one, they toasted Gong Yimo. Gong Che watched from the side and wanted to stop them, but Gong Yimo refused. It's been a long time. It's rare to be happy, so we should drink more. Brother Crown Prince, you should drink too. Gong Yimo poured wine for Gong Che with bright eyes. When she thought of Gong Che getting married in the future, she couldn't fool around like now. Gong Yimo let Gong Che drink to his heart's content today. After all, he would have a wife in a few days. Gong Che's heart was slightly bitter. He was already 22 years old, and marriage was a certainty. However, she was so carefree, as if she didn't care whether he got married or who he married. With this thought, he drank the wine that Gong Yimo poured for him in one gulp. The more he drank, the more sober he became. Gong Yimo didn't know how he felt in his heart. She looked at him silently and chatted with him from time to time. However, most of the time, she chatted with the people in the shipyard. She talked about the huge ship in the past or some suggestions. Gong Che looked at Gong Yimo talking with the people. His eyes were bright, and every word was like a gem. Looking at those worshipful eyes, he suddenly had a crazy feeling in his heart. That feeling was to hide her and not let anyone discover her beauty. It was best for him to enjoy her alone. With this thought, Gong Che drank a few more cups. In the end, Gong Yimo was also drunk and couldn't speak anymore. Seeing that the people present were all drunk, Gong Che waved his hand, and a hidden guard appeared. He let the hidden guard settle these people down and bent down to pick up Gong Yimo. The table full of drunk people didn't see this scene at all. Some people saw it, but they only saw a tall person carefully carrying the petite girl away. His movements were gentle, as if he was carrying a rare treasure. Once out of the shipyard, the night wind blew, and Gong Che's head hurt a little. At this time, a hidden guard wanted to go forward to take the princess, but Gong Che gave him a cold glare, and he was so scared that he didn't dare to go forward. However, Gong Che didn't carry Gong Yimo to the carriage. Instead, he brought her alone to the Long Tongue River. The Long Tongue River was the mother river of the capital. In the past, he didn't understand why the founding emperor of Daiyu State, who had just pacified the country and was recuperating, would waste money and manpower to build this river. But now, under the moonlight, the surging river water was like the history of Daiyu State rolling forward. This river wasn't just a river of life. It was also a river of development. Moreover, the little girl in his arms had used it very thoroughly. However, the person who received this fruit was him. Gong Che didn't understand. Why was she willing to give up all her wealth, was willing to help him secure his position, and was willing to find the best medicine to cure his illness, but she wasn't willing to get close to him at all? Gong Che looked at the little girl, sleeping soundly in his arms. Gong Che only felt that his heart was filled with happiness. He really wished that time could stop at this moment, and that he could hug her forever. Chapter 402. At this time, because Gong Yimo wasn't sleeping well, she moved a bit. Her obedient appearance was as soft as a kitten, making Gong Che's heart melt. Even if his arm was uncomfortable, he wanted her to sleep in a comfortable position. It had been a long time since he had the chance to be so close to her. It wasn't that Gong Yimo was guarding against him. On the contrary, Gong Yimo trusted him a lot. It was just that Gong Dai had caused trouble again and again, making it impossible for him to get close to her. Today, Gong Dai went to the neighboring city's military camp and would only come back tomorrow. And he was about to get married, so he couldn't control himself. He wanted to see her alone and talk to her for a while. Gong Che was very clear. He would marry to protect Gong Yimo and to shut those people's mouths. Because as long as he didn't marry, his imperial mother's gaze would be fixed on Immerse. His imperial father would also find it strange, so he had to marry to explain himself. But he wouldn't touch any other woman besides her. He was willing to keep his chastity for her. When he became the emperor, even if he was scolded for being muddle-headed, he would still marry her. He would disperse the imperial harem for her and let her be the only empress. He knew that she would definitely like it. Gong Che sat on the grass and looked at the woman in his arms. He just couldn't get enough of her. Her eyebrows weren't the most popular curved eyebrows, but they were slightly raised. When she was serious, it gave people a sharp feeling. When she smiled, it gave people a delicate and seductive feeling. Her eyes were like the long-tongue river, containing all things, but also clean and clear. When she looked at someone, she could only see that person's shadow. Gong Che liked to be looked at by her eyes the most. It was as if he was the only one in her world. Her nose was also very cute. It was perky and round, making people want to take a bite. But the most adorable part was her mouth. She would use a voice that he couldn't stand to softly call him Big Brother Crown Prince and eat those snacks that he found sweet. He could also kiss her. Thinking of this, he felt a little hot and unbearable, and also a little nervous, except for the first time when Immerse kissed him when he was 16 years old. Until now, he was 22 years old. He had been dreaming of her for 6 whole years. Every time he thought about it, he would feel shy. Moreover, she was lying in his arms, so he could do whatever he wanted. Do whatever I want? This was really a word that made it hard for people to control themselves. At this moment, Gong Yimo let out a small moan. She seemed to be dreaming. She lightly smacked her lips. Her small face was clearly outlined under the moonlight. Her red lips were moist, with a hint of bewitchment. And he was the one who was easily bewitched. Gong Che lowered his head. After 6 years, he once again tasted the taste of his beloved. His heart was beating very fast. Was his heart disease going to relapse? His kiss was very careful, with a trace of nervousness, fear, and sweetness. Gradually, he deepened the kiss. His ears were filled with the sound of his heartbeat. In this kind of night, it was so beautiful. Gong Yimo was a little out of breath from his kiss. She couldn't help but wave her hand and struggle a little. And this time, Gong Che's mind was broken. He turned over and pressed Gong Yimo under him. He watched her long hair bloom on the grass. She was like a fairy in the night, delicate, charming, and obediently lying under him. Gong Che's eyes were dark. He reached out and gently stroked her hair. It was like the best brocade, cool and smooth. I really missed the time when we were in the Hawaii River. We lived in the same courtyard. I could eat with you every day. I could see you every day. You were always within my reach. Gong Che slowly lowered his body. With a pained expression, he kissed Gong Yimo's face. That soft and tender feeling was exactly as he had imagined. So fragrant, so beautiful. I really want to tie you to my bed. I want you to never leave me again. Immerse. As he spoke, he couldn't help but kiss Gong Yimo again. Only this time he used a little more force. He felt that he couldn't control himself anymore. He couldn't wait to be emperor. He wanted her now. Gong Che kissed Gong Yimo so deeply that she couldn't breathe. Just as she was about to move, Gong Che grabbed her hand and pressed it against the grass above her head. In a daze, Gong Yimo felt that she was being kissed deeply. She even felt a hot body pressing against her body. She squirmed and mumbled, "Gong Dai, stop fooling around." The person on top of her suddenly stopped moving. Gong Yimo had too much to drink. Seeing that the person on top of her was obedient and really stopped moving, she mumbled, "Go to sleep." At that moment, all reason in Gong Che's mind crumbled. His eyes turned red again. In the past, when he was aroused, his eyes would turn dark red. But at this moment, his eyes were bloodshot and filled with veins. It was as if he was a beast that was suddenly released. His entire person became extremely dangerous. He suddenly grabbed Gong Yimo's chin. This was the first time he had been so rough. That mask of gentleness was immediately torn apart. Only his crazy nature was left. "Gong Yimo." He held her chin tightly and called her name, forcing her to open her eyes. "Gong Yimo, open your eyes and tell me who I am." He really couldn't stand it. He was kissing the woman he loved, but she was calling another man's name. Gong Yimo felt pain and gave a grunt. She half opened her eyes. However, her eyes were hazy and she was clearly unconscious. Seeing those old friends today reminded her of the time when they were building the canal together. She could not help but drink a few more cups and was still unconscious. Seeing her look at him in such a dazed manner and her unconscious flirtatious appearance, the furious Gong Che felt as though he had been electrocuted. The strength in his hand miraculously lessened. Gong Yimo felt the hand on her chin loosen its grip. She shrunk her neck back to free her chin. However, she rubbed her chin against his hand, unconsciously expressing her closeness to him. How could she not feel closeness? In this life, she had grown up together with Gong Dai. In her previous life, she had been husband and wife with Gong Che for so many years. She was most familiar with the two of them. No matter how you looked at it, it was an ill-fated relationship. Gong Che's heart hurt so much that it felt like it had been dug out. However, her closeness to him was like the only salvation in this suffocating pain. He lowered his head again and kissed her lips while trembling. It should have been the happiest thing, but at this moment, it felt so bitter. It was as if his soul had been twisted together by her. Even breathing was painful. "Immerse, I'm Gong Che. I am your man. I am Gong Che. I am your man." He kissed her while telling her in such a low and repetitive voice. It was as if he was hypnotizing her. He wanted to be her man. Moreover, he would definitely be her man. He definitely would be. What Gong Dai? He wanted to kill him. Immerse was his. It was Gong Dai. It was Gong Dai who stole her. As long as he killed Gong Dai, everything would be fine. Chapter 403. Somehow, Gong Che had made up his mind. Looking at Gong Yimo, his gaze softened and became resolute. "Immerse, you have to wait for me. I am your true love. One day, you will fall in love with me, just like how I love you." Su Miaolon covered her mouth tightly in the dark. She could not imagine that her strict and disciplined brother, the Crown Prince, would fall in love with his own half-sister. No wonder he would appear whenever Gong Yimo attended a banquet. No wonder he would give her the best heavenly cloud brocade. No wonder he would stand by Gong Yimo's side, no matter what happened. Not only did he treat her as his sister, but he also treated her as his most beloved woman. Looking at the scene before her, Gong Che's gentleness, restraint, pain, and sweetness, she had never seen so many emotions from Gong Che. He was always cold to her. Although he was smiling, that smile was the same to everyone. He only smiled from the bottom of his heart when he saw Gong Yimo. So, she did not like Gong Yimo from the beginning. So it was like this. Su Miaolon had gone to the shipyard, but did not find anyone. She walked out again and found the Crown Prince's carriage. So she guessed that the Crown Prince must be nearby and was with Gong Yimo. In order to find out what they were talking about, she boldly went out without bringing anyone. Sure enough, she found two overlapping figures by the soaring Dragon River. She was not sure at first, but the other party suddenly shouted Gong Yimo. Only then did she know that the Crown Prince and Gong Yimo were there. Slut! Shameless! She even seduced her own brother. She wanted to rush out and expose everything. But once she was exposed, would the crown prince still marry her? Moreover, if she did not handle it well, the emperor would be angry and the crown prince would be implicated. Then what was the point of her being the crown princess? Her heart was in a mess. She wanted to leave, but when she turned around, she bumped into someone. That person was dressed in black. It was obvious that he was one of the crown prince's men. At this moment, Gong Chei's mood had slightly calmed down. However, when he saw Su Miaolon who was thrown in front of him, the evil fire from before flared up again. He sneered at Su Miaolon. Did your marquis residence's upbringing teach you to stalk men before marriage? Su Miaolon's face paled at his sarcastic words. She raised her head and saw with her own eyes how gently Gong Chei held Gong Yimo in his arms and how coldly he questioned her. Su Miaolon only felt her anger surging. She wished she could go up and tear apart Gong Yimo's foxy face. But she couldn't. Brother Crown Prince, why are you treating me like this? I like you so much. How could you neglect me for such a bitch? She asked incredulously with tears in her eyes. In order to let Gong Yimo sleep comfortably on his pillow, Gong Chei sat very stiffly. Then, he reached out and gently stroked Gong Yimo's long hair. Although he was sitting on the ground, his aura was cold and sharp. It was not at all like his gentle appearance in front of others during the day. Gong Chei slightly curled his lips and looked at Su Miaolon. Just one glance was enough to make Su Miaolon shrink back in fear, because that gaze was so cold that it could freeze one to the bone. It was simply suffocating. If I wasn't the crown prince, would you still like me? Su Miaolon was stunned. Seeing her subconscious action, Gong Chei laughed softly. Su Miaolon hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. Your Highness, it's not like what you think. Whether you're the crown prince or not, I like you. I'm willing to do anything for you. Gong Chei sneered again. Under the moonlight, he raised his eyebrows and asked softly. As the beloved daughter of the country guarding marquis, he didn't hesitate to fall out with me for you. But that year, everyone, including your father, was trying to kill my grandfather. At that time, where were you? Did you ask your father to say a word for me? Later, when others testified against my mother, her position as the empress was no longer guaranteed. My position as the crown prince became dispensable. At that time, where were you? My future was bleak, and I couldn't do anything alone. There was no one to support me or guide me. At that time, where were you? Gong Chei touched his face. If I was still the person who couldn't even sit firmly on the crown prince's position, would you rather give up your chastity to marry me? What a joke. When he was worthless, she avoided him. Now that he had been supported by Mo, she wanted to pick up the ready-made goods? Su Miaolon listened to his angry words and panicked. At that time, I was still young. My ability was limited. It wasn't that I didn't want to help you, but in her heart, she fiercely scolded herself. If she had watched less and directly asked her father to help, would the ending be different now? Young, Gong Chei listened and snorted disdainfully. At that time, you were the beloved daughter of the country guarding marquis. Every time there was a banquet, you were the #1 beauty in the capital. And she, Gong Chei's gaze fell on Gong Yimo. In an instant, even his voice became as gentle as water, and she, for me, repeatedly contradicted my father. She was willing to give up glory and wealth and be demoted to a commoner for me. If you had half of her intentions, you wouldn't have watched for so long. His words were as sharp as a knife, comparing Su Miaolon to dust. She was younger than you by 2 years, but for me, not only did she give up her wealth, she also took out a weapon so that I could build the canal faster. She put herself in danger. Why can't I love her? Just because she's my little sister? Gong Chei smiled. In front of Su Miaolon, he lowered his head and kissed Gong Yimo's forehead. He used a very light and sincere tone to declare, I love her. I'm willing to give up everything for her, even my life. Su Miaolon was shocked by his words and couldn't regain her senses for a long time. In the end, Gong Chei coldly looked at Su Miaolon and slowly said, You wanted the crown prince's consort, and I gave it to you. But that's all. Maybe you can regret it now, but I'll give you a chance. If Su Miaolon broke the engagement, he would still give her what he promised before. He would keep his word. But Su Miaolon seemed to have lost her soul and sat there for a long time. She liked Gong Che. There was no doubt about that. But she also liked power and status. Could the person that Gong Che found for her make her second only to one person? No. Su Miaolon's gloomy gaze fell on Gong Yimo's body. She had calmed down and hidden all her resentment. The only thing she could do now was to stabilize the crown prince and get married first. When the time came, she would tell the emperor and plot to expose the fact that Gong Yimo had seduced the crown prince. In this way, for the sake of the country's crown prince, the emperor would personally get rid of Gong Yimo. When the time came, she would still be the crown prince's consort. Thinking of this, she finally stood up and said to Gong Che in a very sorrowful and affectionate voice, "Your Highness, I know you've been bewitched by her now. After the wedding, I'll let you know who the woman who loves you the most is." Chapter 404. After saying that, she didn't dare to look anymore and turned to leave. She would let Gong Yimo be proud for once. Anyway, she was the one who was going to marry the crown prince. After the wedding, she must tell the empress about this matter and let Gong Yimo die a horrible death. Gong Che didn't stop her when she left. At this time, one of his subordinates asked, "Your Highness, do you want it?" He made a gesture to silence her. Gong Che sighed and rubbed his brows. He looked at Gong Yimo's sleeping face and finally said only one sentence. "No need." Su Miaolon wanted to be the crown prince's consort, so she definitely wouldn't do anything that was disadvantageous to him, so he didn't need to worry about her. It was already late. He should leave. Looking at the little person in his arms, Gong Che's eyes flashed with a trace of reluctance. There would be plenty of time in the future. He couldn't panic now and couldn't let anyone find out. Otherwise, it would be a disaster for Immerse. So he had to endure and pretend that he had no feelings for her. Gong Che carried Gong Yimo and got up to walk back. His heart felt empty, and he didn't know how long he had to endure. He was too impulsive today. But when he thought about how he was about to get married but the bride wasn't her, he felt that it was hard to restrain himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted like this. But he didn't know that he couldn't restrain himself this time. Not only did Su Miaolon see this scene, two figures also walked out from the opposite side of the Long Tongue River. One of them had a head full of white hair, nervously and humbly walking behind the other tall and sturdy figure. Gong Cheng's face sank. In fact, at such a distance, he couldn't see anything at all. At first, he thought it was a young couple playing there, but he also heard Gong Che's voice that lost control. He was calling Gong Yimo's name. It was Gong Yimo. It was actually Immerse. In that voice, he couldn't be wrong. It was the crown prince's voice that he entrusted with such an important task. His most important son and most important daughter. Actually, Gong Chung still had a trace of luck in his heart. He slowly opened his mouth to ask Changshi, "Who were those two people just now? Why does his voice sound so much like Che?" When Changshi heard his emotionless voice, he immediately knelt down and said in a trembling voice, It's the crown prince. The crown prince and the princess." Gong Cheng's head suddenly hurt. He only felt that this question was ridiculous. Ha, ha, ha. After a long silence, Gong Cheng suddenly burst into laughter. Originally, he just wanted to take advantage of the night to get some fresh air. He didn't expect to bump into such a scene. His son and daughter having an affair, really shameless. Emperor Gong sneered. "He is indeed a good son that I have taught." Poetry, songs, ethics, and morals, where did he learn them? He actually dared to do such a beastly thing to his sister. Was he disregarding the royal family's reputation? To think that we even suspected that Gong Dai and Gong Yimo were having an affair. And Gong Yimo! Gong Chung was extremely angry. He actually called out her name directly. A trace of grief flashed across his face. But more than that, it was anger. I trusted her so much. I valued her so much, and this is how she repaid me. Sure enough, she's not my biological daughter. She can't be raised well. Although it was said out of anger, it still surprised Changshi. He opened his mouth, but finally made up his mind and lowered his head. It's not just a crown prince, what do you mean? Beside the whistling long-tongue river, Gong Chung stared at Chang, she with a pair of fiery eyes. He asked in a threatening tone, "What do you mean it's not just the crown prince?" His expression was so dangerous. Chang Shi sighed. At this point, he had no choice but to say it. If it was only Qi Wang who liked the princess, he would still feel that although it was a hindrance to human relations, it was still acceptable. But now, not only Qi Wang, but the crown prince also liked the princess. This matter was a big deal. The crown prince's position was stable, and he had won the hearts of the people. Qi Wang held military power and was vicious and merciless. If the two of them fought over other women, the world would be turned upside down. Not to mention that those were their younger sister and elder sister. This was really, wouldn't the world laugh at them? Most importantly, if the two of them really fell out, it wouldn't be just the two of them, but the entire Dayu state would be in danger. This couldn't be allowed to happen. Therefore, Changshi suppressed his heartache and guilt and said it in a low voice. It's not just the crown prince who likes the princess. His Highness Qi Wang. He also likes her. It was like a bolt from the blue. Even though Gong Chung had been the emperor for so many years and was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still shocked by this news. Gong Dai, Gong Che, both of them like Gong Yimo? He sternly scolded Chang Shi. What do you mean by this? What evidence do you have? Chang Shi's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but he still gritted his teeth and said, "That day, Your Majesty suddenly fell ill. This servant personally went to Taiji Palace. I accidentally heard it." Gong Cheng's body swayed, and he almost fainted. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you have to take care of your body. This matter still needs to be resolved by Your Majesty." Changshi knelt on the ground and said anxiously. Under the moonlight, he saw that Gong Cheng's face was deathly pale. It was even scarier than when he was seriously ill. "Jin will resolve it. Jin will resolve it." He glared at Changshi with murderous eyes. "Why didn't you wait for Jin to die before saying it? Changshi, how dare you?" Changshi repeatedly kowtowed and said sorrowfully, "This servant deserves to die. This servant deserves to die." But this servant didn't know that the crown prince was interested in the princess. This servant originally thought that if Prince Qi really liked the princess, then the crown prince would ascend the throne and help them to leave. Then the crown prince would take back his power. That would be the best of both worlds. This servant really didn't expect. Gong Chung sneered. "You didn't expect? You're thinking too far ahead. What kind of drugs did Gong Dai feed you? How did Gong Yimo get your loyalty? You actually dared to help them hide it from Jun." Changshi knew that he was being unreasonable, but he lowered his head and didn't dare to speak. Gong Chung was full of grief and indignation. He sat on a huge rock by the soaring dragon river and looked at the turbulent river. His eyes were surging with dark waves, but he didn't say a word. Changshi carefully poked his head out and saw that Gong Cheng's face was ashen, as if he was thinking about something. He felt uneasy. Although he felt guilty, he didn't regret it, because if there was a day when the Crown Prince and Prince Qi fought, then it would really be too late. It's just, how would His Majesty solve this matter? Changshi knelt on the ground and didn't dare to speak. He quietly waited for the Emperor's instructions. Poor Gong Chung, who had been the Emperor for so many years and made so many decisions. But this was the first time he encountered such a situation, right? The night was as cold as water. After a long time, Changshi felt that the Emperor's mood seemed to have calmed down and was seriously thinking about countermeasures. After a long while, Changshi heard Gong Chung faintly say something. "You say, if Gong Yimo dies, will they still fight?" Chapter 405. Chang Shi turned pale with fright. His Majesty's intention was to kill the princess? His mouth opened and closed. He knew that as a servant he shouldn't say anything, but he still couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, you can't, the princess, she is innocent." "Innocent?" Emperor Gong sneered. "So what if she is innocent? Both of my sons like her, and that is her sin." When he said this, his tone was faint, without the slightest emotion. At this time, He was just an iron-blooded emperor, not a father looking at the problem. Admittedly, there were many ways to solve this matter, but he knew his two sons too well. They didn't look alike, but in fact, they had a lot of similarities in character. They were both persistent and monopolistic people. Only Gong Yimo's death was the best solution. Moreover, she couldn't be killed. It was best to die silently. In this way, even if Gong Che and Gong Dai had a lot of grievances, they couldn't do anything. Could it be that they could resurrect the dead? But, Changshi was sweating profusely and his face was pale. He had lived for so many years and had always been loyal and devoted to the emperor, but the princess was also a child he liked very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone against his principles to hide it from the emperor and directly told him. But he didn't expect that today's matter would happen. Could it be that killing the princess could only solve it? Emperor Gong sat on a stone by the river and began to seriously think about this problem. Death by poison seems too obvious. It's easy to be caught, but I know a kind of poison. After taking it, one's vitality will gradually disappear within a month. There's no antidote, and there's no trace of it. Changshi was about to cry. His Majesty really wanted to kill. He even thought of brown poison, or kick out 2 scapegoats. In any case, Immerse has offended a lot of people over the years. Create an accident and let Immerse die an unnatural death, and then let someone else take the blame. Emperor Gong Chung used a very normal and calm tone to say these words, but Changshi was alarmed. He suddenly straightened up and mustered up his courage to look at the emperor. He asked seriously, "Your Majesty, can you bear to do that?" Was he willing to kill Gong Yimo? Don't you feel heartache? Changshi's words interrupted all of Gong Cheng's thoughts. In that instant, Changshi was certain that he saw an emotion called struggle on the emperor's face. His face alternated between gloominess and pain, as if he was changing his face. But in the end, he looked at Long Tinghe and slowly spoke. "What's there to be reluctant about? For the sake of the Dai you state, for the sake of the people, I cannot allow them to act recklessly for the sake of a woman and cause misery and suffering." As soon as he said that, no matter how much Changshi wanted to say, he could only hold it in. He knew very well that compared to the country, one person was too insignificant. Even Gong Yimo could not compare. "I'll leave this matter to you." Emperor Gong Chung finally made a decision. "I want the brown poison tomorrow. You can't let anyone know about this. Otherwise, you can die." Changshi's heart ached, and he lowered his head. This servant obeys the decree. Gong Yimo had a good sleep. When she woke up, she found herself in Taiji Palace. Strange, it was so late last night. Why did Crown Prince Brother send her to the palace? Gong Yimo rubbed her eyebrows. Because of the hangover, she couldn't remember everything that happened last night. At this time, she felt an itch on her hand. When she looked, it turned out to be the monkey. Because it was wild and hard to tame, Gong Yimo chained it to the side of the bed, leaving it nowhere to go. When it saw Gong Yimo wake up, it squeaked. Its human-like eyes showed anger, as if it was very dissatisfied with Gong Yimo's cold treatment. Gong Yimo looked at it and then untied the shackles on its feet. Once it was free, it immediately clawed at Gong Yimo. However, Gong Yimo caught its claws and pressed it on the bed, unable to move. "Little thing, you better behave. My temper is very good, but if you annoy me, I don't mind eating raw monkey brains." She knew that this fellow was intelligent and could understand her words. Sure enough, when she said that, the monkey's strength to struggle lessened. A typical example of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Gong Yimo smiled and said, "You can also leave here. But in a place like the palace, there's no lack of bad people. When the time comes, you'll be captured. It's good enough to raise you, but I'm afraid that you'll be captured and killed. You won't even know how you died. I advise you to be obedient in my hands. At least, I'll give you 3 meals a day." The monkey seemed to understand her words. It turned its head with difficulty to look at Gong Yimo, as if it wanted to beg for mercy. Gong Yimo released her hand and let it go. This time, it didn't make a fuss. Instead, it sat obediently on the bed, looking very obedient. At this moment, the palace servants came in. When the Ani in charge saw that the little monkey was so obedient, she said, "Princess is really capable. It became obedient the moment you came. It was so fierce yesterday, and didn't let anyone get close to it." Gong Yimo glanced at the little monkey and smiled. "Is that so? In the future, if it doesn't listen to you, just beat it. It'll become obedient after a lot of beating." Her words made the little monkey protest softly. It turned around and faced her with its butt, ignoring her. This scene made the auntie in charge laugh. "It's really an intelligent little thing. Princess, have you given it a name?" Gong Yimo looked at the color of its fur. "Let's call it Little Gray." In response, the monkey jumped up and clawed at her. Gong Yimo didn't want to spoil it. She slapped it on the bed and asked softly, "Did something happen in the palace?" This was a question that Gong Yimo would ask every day when she got up. Therefore, the person who came to help her wash up every day was the Ani in charge. The Ani in charge thought for a moment and said, "There really is something. During the morning court today, His Majesty lost his temper. Many people were severely reprimanded by His Majesty. I don't know why, but the court just ended." When she said this, Gong Yimo's expression became serious, and she pondered. Most of the time, Emperor Gong didn't show his emotions. She didn't know what happened to make him so angry. On the other side, a first-rank official walked beside Gong Dai and asked him the same question in a low voice. "Wang Ye, what do you think His Majesty today?" What did he mean? He was also one of the officials who was reprimanded today. He always felt flustered and uneasy. Gong Dai wore a black official robe and walked at the front of the group leaving the palace. At this time, the court just ended. But because of the emperor's evil temper, everyone was scared and didn't dare to speak. "It's enough to do your duty. You don't need to think about other things," Gong Dai said coldly. When the man heard this, he quickly said yes and didn't dare to speak again. Gong Dai left him and strode out of the palace. Today, the emperor's anger wasn't directed at anyone, but Gong Dai felt that this matter wasn't simple. As soon as he left the palace, Bai Sheng came to greet him. He was a little strange. Why was the morning court so long? "Quickly go and investigate something." Seeing his Wang Ye's serious expression, Bai Sheng quickly responded. "Please give me your orders, Wang Ye." Gong Dai was silent for a moment. He originally wanted Bai Sheng to investigate if the people who were reprimanded today had any private contact. But when the words were about to come out of his mouth, he changed his mind. "Go and find out where Changshi went." Chapter 406. Yes. Bai Sheng did not ask any more questions and quickly left. At this time, Gong Dai turned around and looked at the palace door behind him thoughtfully. The tension in the imperial court today was not an illusion. The emperor must have made a move, but he did not know who the target was or why. Why did he feel so uneasy? Bai Sheng was very fast. Even though Changshi was very careful, he still found out that Changshi was not in the capital because he had gone to the medicine king, Li Xian, outside the city to ask for medicine. This medicine was not ordinary. It was the famous qi poison. Bai Sheng was puzzled. Why did the emperor want qi poison? Wasn't this poison banned along with the brown poison? It was a banned medicine in Daiyu state. This was a decree personally issued by the emperor. Qi poison was a colorless and odorless poison. It could not be detected by silver needles, but it could kill. The key point was that after a person died, it would cause the corpse to show purple ecchymosis and emit a strange smell, which would make people mistake it for the plague. Therefore, those who were poisoned were usually buried carelessly, and no one would examine the corpse. With these questions in mind, Bai Sheng hurriedly went into the palace to find out more information. After spending a lot of effort, he actually managed to find out the whole story. It turned out that the emperor had a concubine by his side, Li Pin. That person was the emperor's cousin. When she first entered the palace, the emperor doted on her for a while. After she gave birth to a somewhat slow-witted child, the emperor gradually distanced himself from her. After all, the imperial harem in Daiyu state was so big that one woman was nothing. However, Li Pin could not bear the loneliness and actually had an affair with a guard. When the emperor heard this, he was very angry. He wanted to directly explode, but he felt that he would lose face. Li Pin's mother was also the emperor's aunt. She was the most unreasonable person. If Li Pin was directly killed, her mother would definitely come and make a fuss. She would definitely want to know the truth, but that would not do. Therefore, the emperor wanted her to die from the qi poison. This way, her aunt would only avoid her and would not investigate the real cause of her death. With the results of the investigation, Bai Sheng quickly went back to report to Gong Dai. When Gong Dai heard it, although he felt strange, he couldn't find any flaws, so he didn't say anything. On the other side, Changshi was standing in front of the emperor, trembling with fear. He only felt that the 2 packets of poison in his hands were like scalding hot, and he couldn't hold them properly. Not only did he bring the habitat poison, he also brought the brown poison. Is it done? The emperor lifted the teacup and took a sip of tea as he asked leisurely. Changshi's old face was tense as he said in a low voice, "It's done. As for Medicine King Li Xian, your servant used his wife's life to threaten him. He didn't dare to disobey. As for Concubine Li, she also followed your majesty's orders and spread the news." Concubine Li and the imperial bodyguard were having an affair. In fact, Emperor Gongcheng was aware of it before, but he regarded the other as his cousin and turned a blind eye to it. But after what happened last night, he could no longer tolerate such things. This time, he really wanted to kill Concubine Li as well. Since it's done, what are you still standing there for? Go, give Concubine Li a cup of ice-top bird's nest. Remember, watch her eat it. Yes. Changshi hurriedly went to do it. This wasn't the first time he poisoned someone, but it was the first time he felt so guilty. But the emperor's expression was very calm. He knew that with Gong Dai's ability, he might be able to find some clues, so he came up with this idea. He also decided that after Concubine Li's death, he would also execute the Medicine King's family. This way, even if Gong Dai found out about this matter, he would only think that he killed them to cover up the cause of Concubine Li's death. In this way, no one would know that he not only brought the habitat poison, but also the brown poison. In order to ensure that his plan was foolproof, Emperor Gongcheng specially threw a tantrum and attacked some people related to his aunt to mislead others. In this way, there shouldn't be any problems. That night, the emperor called Gong Yimo to eat. This was a common occurrence, so Gong Yimo didn't think much about it and went to Zhaoyang Hall. But when she was changing her clothes, the steward aunt told her that a concubine in the palace had just died, but because it was suspected to be caused by the plague, it was dealt with in a low-key manner. The courtyard where she lived was also under martial law. She also told Gong Yimo to be careful when she went out, so she didn't get infected by this unknown disease. This wasn't a big deal. People in the harem died every day in all kinds of ways, so Gong Yimo was already used to it. So when she heard it, she didn't take it to heart and only sighed with regret about the unfortunate fate of a beautiful woman. Almost as soon as Concubine Li died, Gong Dai received the news. Bai Sheng couldn't help but feel relieved. Since he brought back the news in the afternoon, His Highness had been preoccupied. Could he be at ease now? Who knew that Gong Dai, who was looking at the document, closed it and said in a low voice, "Prepare the horse. Ben Wang wants to enter the palace." Bai Sheng was surprised and quickly went out to prepare the horse. Although he was curious about why he wanted to enter the palace so late at night, he didn't dare to ask. In reality, Gong Dai also didn't know what he wanted to do, but today's matter was too strange. First, the emperor was furious. Later, he found out that the people who were involved in his outburst were all related to Concubine Li. Combined with what he found later, it was easy to connect the dots that the emperor was angry because Concubine Li had an affair with a guard. Concubine Li had indeed taken the habitat poison. The Medicine King, Li Xian, didn't dare to hide it from him. Then where did it go wrong? Concubine Li had an affair, so Fu Huang was furious and attacked the people involved. It made sense. The habitat poison, the entire capital knew that only Li Xian could make the forbidden medicine. This wasn't wrong. Concubine Li's mother was the emperor's aunt. That woman was very difficult to deal with. Fu Huang would choose to let Concubine Li die from the habitat poison and save some unnecessary trouble. Then where did the problem come from? It wasn't until Bai Sheng brought the horse over and Gong Dai got on the horse that his mind cleared up for a moment. The emperor, that person, was the most conceited and looked down on women. Therefore, he wouldn't go through so much trouble to deal with a woman, even if it meant executing her. Only concubine Shui could receive such serious treatment. And now, royal sister. His expression tensed up, and he quickly rode the horse towards the imperial city. Gong Yimo had already arrived at Zhaoyang Hall. Looking at the table full of good dishes, she widened her eyes and asked, "Fu Wang, what's the occasion today? Why are there so many dishes?" Emperor Gong wasn't an extravagant person. When he had a meal, he usually had 9 dishes and 1 soup, with the intention of perfection. But today, there were a total of 99 dishes. Every one of them was exquisite, making one's appetite whet. Ever since Gong Yimo came in, Emperor Gong had been staring at her. When he heard her question, he didn't even think about it and said, "This is a special reward for you, Mo. Reward me?" Gong Yimo sat down and stared at him with a pair of beautiful eyes. She grinned and said, "What did I do?" Chapter 407. What good deed did she do? The emperor's face darkened for a moment, but he had been the emperor for so many years. That moment of anger was so fast that no one could detect it. But even if he didn't show it, it didn't mean that others couldn't feel it. Zhaoyang Hall was full of old people, and they felt something was wrong for no reason. Their movements in and out were much lighter. Gong Yimo didn't seem to feel it and continued to look at the emperor. The emperor lowered his eyes and smiled. "Yes, I did do a good deed. I received a secret letter from Yuqi. Although they are now in internal strife, they are still very interested in the bank and have the intention to trade. All of this is thanks to you, Mo. It was obviously just an excuse, but for some reason, he felt his heart ache. All of this was indeed due to Gong Yimo's efforts. If it weren't for her, the four-nation trade treaty would simply be nonsense, not to mention the current harmony between the two countries. Moreover, Yuqi's letter also mentioned Gong Yimo. Obviously, he knew of her talent and wanted to invite her to Yuqi as a guest. This daughter of his was really amazing. Hearing Emperor Gong's words, Gong Yimo didn't doubt it at all. She wasn't a suspicious person, not to mention, it was her family in this life. Imperial father is too kind. This is what I should do. Gong Yimo stared at the dishes but said to Emperor Gong, "In the future, Dayu State will become richer and richer. When the time comes, Imperial father can reward me with more delicious food." Her words made Emperor Gong dumbfounded, but his heart became more and more sour. At this time, the dishes were gradually served, and the air was filled with the fragrance of food. Mixed together, it didn't smell bad, but made people hungrier. Gong Yimo looked at the emperor with some embarrassment. "Then I'll start eating?" Emperor Gong glared at her. "Eat." As he said so, he also glanced at the table. The table was filled with dishes, but there was only one soup. Gong Yimo had a habit of scooping a bowl of soup and putting it aside before eating. Today was no exception. Gong Yimo scooped a bowl of soup and put it aside before eating. She picked up a piece of crispy meat and put it in her mouth. Her eyes immediately narrowed, and after eating, she sighed with emotion. "Imperial father, the imperial chef's skills are really too good. I'm going to be fed until I'm fat." Looking at her satisfied expression, Emperor Cheng's nose twitched for no reason. "If you like it, eat more. Tell me what you want to eat. Do you think Zhen will shortchange you?" Gong Yimo nodded. She was not polite at all. Although she ate quickly, she was not rude at all. Instead, she gave off a generous feeling. Gong Cheng looked at his daughter and forgot to move his chopsticks. Today, Gong Yimo was wearing a pink gauze dress. It was the most delicate color, and it made her look as delicate and beautiful as a blooming flower. Her hair was loosely tied into a bun, and she wore a hairpin she made herself. It was a fluffy pink ball with white and red tassels. Whenever she lowered her head slightly to eat something, the tassels would slide to the side of her face, making her face look exceptionally fair. When she ate something delicious, Gong Yimo would happily curve her eyebrows. It was really too moving. Emperor Cheng suddenly felt that if he was Gong Che and Gong Dai's age, would he also fall in love with someone he shouldn't? While he was lost in thought, A piece of tofu was placed on his clean plate. He looked up and saw Gong Yimou's sly eyes. She giggled and said, "Father Emperor, your body is just getting better. Why don't you eat something light?" Her completely trusting appearance made Emperor Cheng's throat suddenly choke, and he couldn't say a word. "Emperor," Emperor Cheng said with difficulty after a long while, "do you have any wishes?" He originally wanted to ask if she had any unfulfilled wishes, but she was so smart that he didn't dare to ask. He added, "You've done so much for Dayu State. If you have any wishes, just say it. We will satisfy you." "I don't have any wishes," Gong Yimou subconsciously replied. She also felt that the emperor was a little strange tonight. She bit her chopsticks. Dayu State can develop well, not fight, and become richer and richer. Other than that, I don't have any wishes. She was absolutely sincere when she said this, because there was no desire in her eyes, and she said it so naturally. It was obvious that this idea had long been deeply ingrained in her heart. Emperor Qing couldn't help but ask, "You're a girl, and you don't want to get married and have children. Why?" "Why?" Gong Yimou looked at him strangely. "Imperial father, you're wrong. Is marriage and having children more important than national affairs? Your daughter is so smart and powerful. Isn't it a waste of talent to marry?" The more she spoke, the more radiant she became, and she looked very pleased with herself. She was always like this. She didn't feel any pressure when praising herself, but it was hard for people to hate her. They even felt that she made a lot of sense. It really made people angry and loved her at the same time. Emperor Cheng glared at her angrily. He endured the pain in his heart and reprimanded her in a low voice. "Even food can't stop you from talking." As he spoke, he reached out to pick up a piece of prawn, but Gong Yimou snatched it away halfway. "Imperial father, you can't eat food now." "Huh? Eat tofu." As she spoke, she even put the prawn in her mouth as if showing off. "Let me reluctantly eat these." "How naughty." After Gong Yimou finished eating, she felt a little thirsty and went to take the bowl of soup. Emperor Cheng's smiling eyes froze. Seeing her bring the bowl to his mouth, Emperor Cheng's hands clenched tightly, as if he was trying to control himself. At that moment, Chang Shi, who had been lowering his head, suddenly looked up and stared at Gong Yimou's movements. Gong Yimou frowned, but she suddenly put down the bowl and sighed. At that moment, the tense air seemed to flow. Emperor Cheng breathed a sigh of relief, but he asked, "What's wrong? Could it be she found out something?" Gong Yimou looked at him, her brows knitted even tighter, and she suddenly said in a serious tone, "Imperial father, are you not in good health?" Emperor Cheng felt strange. "Why do you say that?" Gong Yimou leaned over a little, then quietly pointed at Changshi and said, "Look at eunuch Changshi, his complexion is so bad." "An imperial father, you are also strange, you?" Gong Yimou was a little worried. Although she didn't finish her words, the meaning was obvious. The emperor suddenly became like this. Did his condition worsen? Emperor Cheng stared blankly, looking at the little face so close to him, so serious. After a long struggle, he pouted and said, "Imperial father, my words are not pleasant to hear, but if you really have a problem, don't bear it alone. Tell me, I am your intimate little cotton-padded jacket." Emperor Cheng forced back the tears that suddenly welled up, and he had to shift his gaze to Changshi. Changshi plopped down on his knees, scaring Gong Yimou. Chapter 408. Something must have happened. Eunuch Changshi, what happened? Gong Yimou put down her chopsticks and asked seriously. Emperor Gong also sorted out his emotions and asked in a deep voice, "Yes, what happened to you, old man? Why did you kneel down?" Hearing the emperor and princess's voice, Changshi wanted to cry. He was always eloquent, but at this time, he couldn't say a word. There was poison in that bowl of soup. When the people in the room saw Changshi kneel down, they stopped what they were doing and panicked. But looking at the emperor's calm expression, he didn't seem to be angry. They were quiet and motionless, but the atmosphere in the room became very strange, making Changshi's forehead break out in cold sweat. This slave's body is a little unwell. When Changshi said this, the emperor's face eased a lot. Since you're not feeling well, you can go down. You don't need to serve me. But when he said this, Changshi didn't leave immediately. Gong Yimo saw this and said to the emperor, Imperial Father, just tell me what happened. Why are you so strange tonight? Emperor Gong quietly gave Changshi a look, telling him to leave quickly, and then said to Gong Yimo, It's nothing. Changshi is old. Because of something yesterday, I reprimanded him. He probably felt uncomfortable in his heart. Is that so? Gong Yimo was half convinced and half doubtful, but looking at Changshi's back, she really trembled. Perhaps it was really Changshi's problem. In order to change the topic, Emperor Gong said, What about you? Where did you go yesterday? Gong Yimo didn't think much. Yesterday, I went to the shipyard with Crown Prince Gij. Seeing the emperor's face suddenly sank, Gong Yimo thought that he knew she was drunk. She hurriedly stuck out her tongue and acted coquettishly. It's all some old friends, so I drank a few more cups. I didn't mean to get drunk. Why would a girl like you go to a shipyard? Could it be that the crown prince wants a princess like you to help him build a ship? Not really. Gong Yimo looked a little conflicted. Originally, Brother Crown Prince only wanted to ask me some questions. I was the one who wanted to go. Seeing that the emperor's expression was still ugly, Gong Yimo couldn't help but tell the truth. It's not a big deal. I want to go to the shipyard because of what? Gong Cheng asked seriously. Gong Yimo blinked and moved in the direction of Gong Cheng, trying to curry favor with him. Previously, I wanted to give you a super luxurious dragon boat. Cough cough, although I blew it up later, the technology is still in my head. So I wanted to take this opportunity to make another big dragon boat for you. Now that both sides of the canal are rich and populous, Fu Huang can take the boat I built and go down south for a cruise. Won't it be fun and awe-inspiring? Gong Cheng was stunned. He really didn't expect that Gong Yimo went to the shipyard yesterday for this. Gong Yimo said again, Fu Huang, you should also relax yourself. You should know that going out for a walk will make your body better. Look at you, working hard for the country every day. Your daughter is distressed. How about you put down your government affairs and become a rich man in Jiangnan for the sake of your daughter? This was also what Gong Yimo suddenly thought of yesterday. She was also distressed by the loss of that ship, so she built another one to make up for her regret. But when she said this, Gong Cheng didn't react at all. It was really strange. She didn't know how uncomfortable Gong Cheng's heart was now. Gong Yimo blinked and glanced at his face when she was thirsty. She picked up the bowl of soup and prepared to secretly drink it. At this time, she heard Gong Cheng suddenly drink it. Don't drink it. What's wrong? Gong Yimo looked at him strangely. That look made Gong Cheng feel guilty and ashamed. Imola was such a smart child, but she didn't suspect him at all. This soup was poisoned. If she knew, who knows how sad she would be. The soup is cold. Change it. Gong Cheng made up his mind and said, Come, make a Yurong lily soup. With that, he nervously stared at the soup bowl in Gong Yimo's hand. Don't you like Yurong lily soup? Wait a little longer. At that moment, he actually hoped that Gong Yimo would put down the bowl. But Gong Yimo didn't care and waved her hand. It's okay. No need to be so troublesome. With that, she went to drink the bowl of soup. Bang! The closed door was suddenly opened. Everyone looked up and only saw Gong Dai standing there panting. He looked at the bowl raised by Gong Yimo, and without thinking, he directly used Qin Gong to grab it. Royal sister. At this time, some palace servants also hurriedly ran in. They started to stop Gong Dai but failed. As soon as they came in, they knelt down and called for the emperor's forgiveness. Gong Cheng's face sank. Gong Dai, you're presumptuous. He actually rushed him like this. He simply didn't put him, the emperor, in his eyes. When Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo was fine, his heartbeat gradually calmed down. Then his clear black and white eyes looked at the emperor without blinking, and finally hooked up his lips. This son was rude. Please don't be angry. This son really has an urgent matter to ask for father. As for this bowl of soup, he looked at the still somewhat confused royal sister and couldn't help but smile. Royal sister certainly won't mind giving me a bowl of soup to drink, right? At this time, Gong Yimo also realized that there seemed to be a problem with this bowl of soup. She glanced at Gong Chung with heavy eyes. She didn't know why, but when she didn't smile, Gong Chung actually felt so scared and distressed, because Gong Yimo had never looked at him with such eyes. His guilty conscience turned into anger. Gong Dai, do you suspect that Jun poisoned him, or? Gong Dai didn't speak, only holding the bowl, and coldly glanced at the emperor. How can it be? How can this son suspect father? If father doesn't believe it, then this son will drink this bowl of soup, okay? Presumptuous. Gong Chung was really angry. Can Gong Dai drink it? If he drinks it, he will die. Then how will Mo or view him, her father, in the future? You come here. The emperor casually pointed to a person. You go and drink that bowl of soup. That person was startled, looked at Gong Dai with some embarrassment, and then reached out to take the bowl in his hand. Gong Dai naturally handed it over to him. He wanted to see what mysteries were in it. That palace servant was now a little uneasy. This soup can't really be poisoned, right? But when he remembered that the princess was His Majesty's most beloved child, how could it be? So, in a spurt of energy, he raised his head and drank it. But only a bang sound was heard. The bowl in the palace servant's hand suddenly cracked and broke into several pieces. It turned out that Gong Yimo directly smashed the bowl with chopsticks, making Gong Chung couldn't help but look at her nervously. Gong Yimo smiled slightly. This soup is cold. I won't drink it. Chapter 409. At that moment, everyone looked at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo just stared at the palace servant who hadn't recovered from his shock. Finally, she said, I'm sorry, I accidentally dirtied your clothes. Go and change your clothes. At this moment, the palace servant clearly sensed that something was wrong. He looked anxiously at the ashen-faced emperor. When he saw the emperor nod his head slightly, he retreated as if he had been pardoned. At that moment, he felt as if he had just survived a disaster. At this time, the new lily soup was also served. Seeing that the people in the room didn't dare to act rashly, Gong Yimo directed the servant to remove the original black chicken soup and replace it with jade lily soup. Gong Dai stared coldly at Gong Chung the whole time. Gong Chung was a person who didn't show his emotions on his face. Gong Dai's expression changed several times, and he was even more certain of his guess. There really was a problem with the bowl of soup just now, but why? Gong Dai looked at the royal sister, who was still expressionless, and his eyes flashed with confusion. Why would the emperor drug such a good person like royal sister? She was clearly fine the day before yesterday. Could it be that something happened yesterday? He remembered Bai Sheng's report that royal sister and the crown prince went to the shipyard to drink yesterday. Could it be that the crown prince did something? Gong Dai's face darkened. Gong Yimo took a deep breath. She smiled at the emperor and said, Imperial father, don't be angry. Gong Dai can be a little reckless sometimes. Please forgive him. Saying that, she smiled at Gong Dai and said, Have you eaten? Haven't you eaten together? She actually wanted to eat this meal. Gong Dai swept the dishes on the table. Who knew if there were any other poisoned dishes besides that bowl of soup? He couldn't let the royal sister be in the slightest danger. However, Gong Yimo had already made up her mind. She directly sat down at the table, then glanced at the two people and slightly raised her eyebrows. What? You don't want to accompany me to eat this meal? Gong Chung only felt his face burning at this time. But if he didn't sit down now, wouldn't it show that he was guilty? Gong Dai, on the other hand, was thinking that if there really was poison, the emperor would not poison him as well. He sat down and treated it as a test for the royal sister. Then, Gong Yimo watched as Gong Dai took a little bit of each dish. It was obvious that he was testing for poison. The emperor was so angry that he wanted to flip the table. Gong Yimo sighed. Everyone leave? As soon as she said this, the palace servants present couldn't care less. They hurriedly retreated and left this troublesome place. In such a large banquet hall, only the three of them were left. At this time, Gong Yimo gave Gong Chung a piece of shrimp that he liked to eat. Gong Chung glanced at her and saw that there was nothing wrong with her face, as if nothing had happened. He couldn't help but soften his expression and said, Emoler, don't listen to Gong Dai's suspicions. He has been in Zhao prison for a long time and sees everyone as a bad person. Gong Dai heard this and sneered. At this time, he had already tried all the dishes in front of Gong Yimo and confirmed that there was no poison. At this time, he wouldn't say anything to provoke the emperor. What if the emperor flew into a rage out of humiliation? Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't speak, Gong Chung thought that she didn't believe him. He ate the dish that she had picked up, completely forgetting that Gong Yimo said that he couldn't eat food because he had just recovered from his illness. Gong Yimo quietly watched his actions and said faintly, "Imperial Father is overthinking. How can I not believe you?" She said this, but not only did Gong Chung not feel at ease, but he also felt that there was something wrong with her tone. "Imperial Father, I have decided to find the snow Ganoderma for you." What? Gong Ju and Gong Ju were both shocked. Emperor Gong Chung wondered why Gong Ju would suddenly have such an idea. Gong Ju, on the other hand, disagreed. He thought that his sister was too easy to bully, but was that even possible? "No, you can't go. Jin's body is very good." Gong Yimo shook her head. "I have made up my mind." Gong Yimo whispered, "In Lu Yi, I have seen some Snow Clan people. They must have some Snow Ganoderma in their hands. If they don't have it, I will go find the Snow Country's treasure." Why do you have to do this?" Gong Cheng's heart became more and more uneasy. Gong Yimo's serious little face made him feel very ironic. "This is what I should do." Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai. At this time, Gong Dai didn't say anything. In any case, as long as it was what she said, he would support it. Gong Cheng's thick eyebrows wrinkled and suddenly had a headache. "Why are you not obedient?" He was doing it for her own good. Gong Yimo blinked and looked at him with a smile. "Is there any use in being obedient? Imperial Father, don't you still hate me?" Gong Cheng's eyes widened. "Nonsense. Who told you that? Did he need someone to tell him that?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "When I was a child, I was only 3 years old. You threw me into the cold palace. You threw me there for 6 years. They always said that you like my imperial mother very much. I don't believe it. Otherwise, why would you treat me like this?" Gong Chung was speechless. Could he say that it was because he suspected that the Snow Clan people had done something to Gong Yimo's body? Since she wasn't his child, it would be best if he didn't see her. If he didn't miss Imperial concubine Shui, he might have directly killed this hidden danger. Seeing that he didn't speak, Gong Yimo continued, "I guess that Imperial Father didn't like me, so after leaving the cold palace, I wholeheartedly tried to please you. I couldn't wait to make some achievements for you to see. Every time I received your praise, I was very happy. It was much more meaningful than what you rewarded me." That one sentence was full of bitterness, and it actually made Gong Chung feel somewhat ashamed. Gong Yimo just poured herself a bowl of soup to hide the trembling in her voice. She connected everything that happened just now and guessed that it wasn't the Emperor's health that had a problem, but the Emperor wanted to kill her. When she thought of this, she felt a chill in her heart. Gong Chung painfully covered his face. What could he do? Gong Dai and Gong Che both liked Gong Yimo. They were so stubborn, who would be willing to withdraw? If they fought, then wouldn't the people suffer? Could it be that he wanted to kill Gong Dai, or kill the Crown Prince? The air at the table seemed to condense. Gong Yimo drank several mouthfuls of soup in a row to calm down a little. Then she opened her mouth with a somewhat mocking smile. "I always thought that everyone in this world had a human heart. He didn't treat you well. Half of the reason is that you didn't do enough." Gong Dai heard this from the side and sighed slightly. Gong Yimo used to teach him like this, but she didn't know that a soft-hearted and magnanimous person like her would never understand that in some people's hearts, benefits were the most important. Gong Cheng's heart ached. Just as he was about to say something, Gong Yimo coldly said the last sentence. "I will find the snow Ganoderma and give it to you, Imperial Father. Just consider it as completing our father-daughter relationship in this life." Chapter 410. What? Gong Chung stood up at once. His aggressive appearance made Gong Ju vigilant, and he stared at him closely. But Gong Chung just stared at Gong Yimo, who was still calmly drinking the soup, and said in disbelief, "What did you say?" Gong Yimo sighed. She looked up and calmly looked at Gong Chung. I said, Father Emperor, you don't like me, so I won't force you. I won't be your daughter anymore. You. Gong Chung glared at her and pointed at Gong Yimo with a trembling finger. He seemed to be very angry. There were no parents in the world, but this girl actually said such words in a fit of anger? I think you're already delirious. After a long while, he opened his mouth, but because his face was pale, his tone was fierce but weak. Do you think you could be the princess if you don't want to? Gong Yimo looked at him quietly. I know I used to climb up the social ladder, but now I don't want to be the princess, okay? I swear I will never come back again, okay? Bastard. Gong Chung roared. He looked at Gong Yimo. Her attitude was so tough, but if one looked carefully, one would find that her eyes were red. Obviously, she was hurt and exploded. Gong Chung lamented in his heart. Was this the result he wanted? If it weren't for them, why would he be like this? Why would he be like this? There were too many things he wanted to say, but he couldn't say a word. A trace of blood suddenly overflowed from the corner of Gong Cheng's mouth. Gong Yimo turned pale with fright. Without waiting for her to say anything, Gong Cheng spat out another mouthful of blood and finally fainted. Father Emperor. Gong Yimo hugged him with a frightened expression. Gong Dai didn't care so much and hurriedly called the imperial physician. This time, the entire Jiayang Hall was in chaos. Changshi originally saw the emperor fall and looked at Gong Dai very vigilantly, thinking that he did something. But Gong Yimo, who was sitting by the bed, didn't have time to care about this. Seeing the imperial physician finish taking his pulse, she hurriedly asked, How is it? The imperial physician frowned. Princess, don't worry, His Majesty is just anxious. After taking the medicine, he will wake up tomorrow. But his words not only did not make Gong Yimo feel relieved, but also made her frown. This matter, it was all her fault. She knew that the other's body had hidden dangers, but she still said those words in a fit of anger. Gong Dai knew how much Gong Yimo blamed herself. He waved his hand to let everyone withdraw, but she refused to leave. Gong Yimo, so she asked him to stay. No matter what, she was truly loyal to the emperor. After feeding him the medicine, Gong Yimo looked at her father's pale face, and her heart ached. Finally, she couldn't help but say, Father Emperor, it's my fault. As long as you wake up, I'll pretend I never said those words. What was it that Gong Cheng couldn't accept? Maybe he found out that she and Gong Dai were having an affair. Gong Yimo felt a headache coming on. Seeing this, Gong Dai stepped forward and said, Royal sister, it's late. I'll send you to rest. Gong Yimo knew that Gong Dai had something to say to her. She also had something to say. The two people left Jiayang Hall one after the other. The air outside cleared their minds. Gong Yimo sighed and walked towards Taiji Palace. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo's back and frowned slightly. He actually hated the feeling of being controlled by others. But because the other party was him, he couldn't help but pamper him. She just said she was moved by him. At this time, he really didn't dare to force her to do anything. Seeing that they were about to arrive at Taiji Palace, Gong Dai couldn't help but whisper, Royal sister, if this matter is too difficult for you, why don't you try to leave it to me? Gong Dai knew very well that if he wanted to force it, he wasn't afraid of anyone. But he was afraid that Royal sister would be unhappy. Sure enough, Gong Yimo stopped and looked back at him. That look was somewhat aggrieved. Gong Dai's heart instantly melted. Don't interfere in this matter. Gong Yimo pursed her lips. She frowned and added, Tomorrow, I'll ask Imperial Father what's going on. At this time, they were standing on the palace road. There was no lantern, no one. Gong Dai took a step forward and said softly, Royal sister, I hope you understand that there are many things that you can leave to me. There's no need to force yourself. Gong Yimo rubbed between her brows. Although Gong Dai was very obedient in front of her, she wasn't unaware of Gong Dai's reputation in the eyes of others. He was ruthless and would do anything to achieve his goals. So she really didn't dare to let Gong Dai do this matter. It's fine. I can handle it. Don't worry. Gong Yimo said gloomily. She turned and wanted to continue walking, but Gong Dai pulled her back. Under the moonlight, Gong Dai's face was cold and handsome, but there was a trace of sadness. "What's wrong?" Gong Yimo couldn't help but ask. Gong Dai's body tensed up, and his expression was a little awkward. He pondered and frowned slightly. Gong Yimo's originally cold heart softened. "What's wrong?" Gong Yimo asked again. Seeing that she had calmed down, Gong Dai said, "Royal sister, there's one thing that you have to promise me. This is the bottom line." "What is it?" Gong Yimo raised her brows slightly. He held Gong Yimo's hand tightly and sighed. "No matter what happens, no matter what you choose to do, I'll support you. But there's one thing that you can't change." At this moment, the two of them were very close to each other. Gong Yimo could clearly feel that he was nervous. He said seriously, "You said that you're only attracted to me. I'm your only exception. This, no matter what happens, can't change." Otherwise, he really didn't know what he would do. Perhaps he would directly overthrow the current rule and become the emperor himself, as long as he could have her. Gong Yimo was stunned and finally smiled. The moment she smiled, the fierce aura around her dissipated. Under the moonlight, she was calm and beautiful once again. "You're afraid that I'll give up on you because of external factors?" Gong Yimo asked softly as she blinked. Gong Dai pursed his lips and didn't say anything. But that was clearly what he was thinking. It was really too cute. Who would have thought that Prince Chi, who was feared by everyone outside, would be so obedient and cute in front of her? So many little thoughts and worries. She originally wanted to reach out and pinch his face, but when she reached out, she wrapped her arms around his neck. She stood on her tiptoes and lightly planted a kiss on his thin lips. That kiss made her heart tremble. So, this is what it feels like to be attracted to someone? After Gong Yimo kissed him, she quickly retreated. Gong Dai seemed to be a little dazed. "Are you still worried like this?" Her laughter was clear and melodious, like the sound of a silver bell. She turned around and ran away quickly. She was completely different from the solemn look from before. Gong Dai sighed. "Royal sister, as long as you don't change, I'll be calm and steady. Do you understand?" Chapter 411. Early the next morning, Gong Yimo went to guard the emperor. In the morning, many people came to visit the emperor and left. Only Gong Che stayed behind to say a few words. Seeing that the emperor was still unconscious, he left. Not long after he left, Emperor Gong Cheng woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw Gong Yimo, he immediately snorted. "Aren't you leaving? Aren't you not coming back? What are you doing here? Are you waiting to anger me to death?" When he said this, his voice was hoarse, and he didn't even look at Gong Yimo. Seeing that he was awake, Gong Yimo quickly fed him water, but he refused to drink. Gong Yimo had no choice but to let Changshi feed him. Seeing that the emperor drank water and became more energetic, Gong Yimo couldn't help but say pitifully, "Imperial father, I was impulsive yesterday. I was angry. How could I leave? The Princess of Daiyu State is very impressive. Imperial father, you're the best." Emperor Gongcheng was indifferent and still snorted coldly. Gong Yimo had no choice but to mourn. "Imperial father, you have to at least tell me the reason, right? At least let me die in peace." Emperor Gongcheng simply closed his eyes and looked like he was asleep again. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and gave Changshi a look, hinting him to go out. Changshi was still very assured of Gong Yimo. He believed that she wouldn't hurt the emperor, so he took the other palace servants and quietly went out, leaving only the father and daughter. After a long while, Gong Yimo spoke softly. Imperial father, are you awake?" Emperor Gongcheng was motionless. Gong Yimo smiled calmly. "How can a father and daughter have overnight enmity? You're the emperor. Can't you be more magnanimous?" Emperor Gongcheng suddenly opened his eyes, looked at her, and closed them again. "I'm too soft-hearted towards you." That's right. If he hadn't been soft-hearted and hadn't stopped her, she would have already consumed the brown poison and only had a month left to live. He had planned for so long and fooled everyone, but in the end, he had failed because of his own soft-heartedness. Gong Yimo said in a low voice, "I was wrong." She rolled her eyes and said, "It's all Gong Dai's fault for misleading me." To prove to him that you didn't harm me. After you fainted, I purposely took a sip of the black chicken soup and showed it to him. In the end, nothing happened to me. It's all his fault for being suspicious. This time, Gongqing couldn't bear it anymore and opened his eyes abruptly. Didn't you withdraw it? Why did you drink it? Gong Yimo was poison? What was he going to do? That was brown poison. Imperial physician, yes, imperial physician. Without waiting for Gong Chung to speak, Gong Yimo suddenly chuckled. Look at you. You're so nervous. And you still say there's no problem with the soup? How could Gong Chung not understand that he had been fooled by her? You, this stinky girl, actually dared to lie to him. Gong Yimo quickly smoothed his hair and said with a calm expression, Okay. No matter what the reason is, in the end, you didn't let me drink that bowl of soup, so I forgive you. When Gong Chung heard this, he was angry, happy, and scared. Did this girl know how scared he was at that moment? So he simply turned over and ignored her. She actually dared to use this kind of method to trick him? Really good. Seeing him like this, Gong Yimo thickened her face and continued to step forward. She sat on the bed and pushed his body like a spoiled child. Imperial father, you see, I've already forgiven you for poisoning me, but you still don't forgive me for saying a few words in anger? Can't you be a bit more fair? How could these two matters be confused? Why did he poison her? Was it his wish? Thinking of this, Gong Cheng's heart felt a little sour. But on the other side, Gong Yimo's voice also sounded a little aggrieved. Do you not like Immerse anymore? What did Immerse do to make you so angry? She acted like a spoiled child, and Gong Cheng's heart had already softened by half. Now that she felt wronged, Gong Cheng's father's heart moved again, and he finally couldn't help but sigh. He really owed this girl in his previous life. Do you really want me to say it? Gong Chung turned around and looked at her as he asked word by word. Gong Yimo had already thought it through. No matter what the answer was, she was already prepared in her heart. Please say it, I'm listening. Gong Yimo answered seriously. Gong Chung stared at her with burning eyes for a moment. Seeing that she really wanted to discuss this matter frankly, as a father, although he felt awkward, he would not avoid it. Gong Chung was finally willing to tell her. Gong Yimo quickly sat down and listened attentively. Gong Chung sighed, thought about it, and finally decided to get straight to the point. What is your relationship with Che? Gong Yimo was stunned. Wasn't it just the relationship between an older brother and younger sister? Gong Chung didn't beat around the bush and said directly, the night before. I saw it. The night before? The night when she was drunk? Seeing that she really didn't know what happened and had a confused look, Gong Cheng's expression softened a little. But when he thought of what he saw that night, he was once again overcast. I saw Che. He kissed you, and he said that he wanted to be your man. To be honest, saying such things to a little girl like Gong Yimo, even if Gong Chung had lived for a long time, he still felt ashamed. But since he had already said it, he also wanted to see Gong Yimo's reaction, who knew that she would widen her eyes. Imperial father, did you hear wrongly? The emperor glared at her. I may have seen wrongly or heard wrongly, but what about Changshi? You know his martial arts. He saw it with his own eyes. It happened at the Soaring Dragon shipyard, beside the Soaring Dragon River. Moreover, Su Miaolan also saw it. Gong Yimo was stunned. How could this be? Crown Prince Gige clearly said that he had given up on her. But since Gong Cheng said so, it could be seen that the evidence was conclusive. In other words, the Crown Prince hadn't given up on her, but was hiding his feelings? Thinking of those two very restrained hugs, thinking of the gift he gave her, and those words he said he really didn't let go, and he even said that he wanted to be her man? What the hell is going on? Gong Yimo's face was bitter. Imperial father, in all honesty, I really didn't know about this matter, but I thought Crown Prince Gige had already given up. I rejected him. Gong Cheng's face was calm. He knew that this matter wasn't simple. Such repressed and fanatical feelings couldn't be formed in a day or two. So it had been so long? It was a pity that as a father, he was the last to know. Gong Yimo sighed. Imperial father, don't tell me that because of this, you want to execute me? I'm too wronged. Crown Prince Gige is going to marry soon. After he marries, he will definitely change his heart. In any case, he was going to marry Su Miaolon soon. With Su Miaolon's ability, she would definitely keep a close eye on him, right? Looking at her sad face, she seemed to think that it was too much for the Emperor to kill her because of this. Gongqing couldn't help but sigh. Of course, that's not all. Chapter 412. That's not all? Gong Yimo's heart suddenly jumped. She saw Emperor Gong looking at her with a very dignified expression. Emperor, tell me honestly, do you and Gong Dai have feelings for each other? At that moment, Gong Yimo only felt that the air seemed to freeze. It turned out that the Emperor suddenly did this because he knew everything. Seeing Gong Yimo open her mouth but not knowing how to answer, Emperor Gong closed his eyes and frowned. Obviously, he had a headache to a certain extent. Don't tell me that there are no good men in Daiyu State. If there aren't any in Daiyu State, then what about Kim Yun? He's now the Emperor. There are so many people to choose from. Why do you have to choose Gong Dai? Don't tell me you've forgotten that he was practically brought up by you. You're really shameless. Although he didn't say the rest of his words, Gong Yimo's face paled a bit. When all the cover-up was pulled away and the truth was exposed in front of the world, she actually felt so ashamed that she couldn't show her face. Seeing Gong Yimo's expression gradually become miserable, Emperor Gong also felt that his words were too harsh. I know, this matter must have been provoked by Gong Dai first, but he's still young and inexperienced. You've always been the child that I've placed high hopes on. You're so precocious and smart. How can you be so muddle-headed in this matter? Imperial Father. Gong Yimo closed her eyes. Don't say it. Don't say it. If you don't say it, can this matter be treated as if it didn't happen? Emperor Gong sat up and knocked her head with his finger. What are you thinking? Forget about Gong Dai. How can you be muddle-headed with him? Gong Yimo really didn't know how to answer his question. In the end, she smiled bitterly and helplessly. Imperial Father. I don't know why, in fact, I shouldn't have any thoughts about him, but I just unconsciously fell in love with him, and I feel that it's unreasonable. Emperor Gong suddenly opened his eyes nervously. Between you two, don't worry. Gong Yimo sighed. I haven't promised him yet. Gong Chung was relieved and glared at her again. Fortunately, you still care about the affection between siblings. Gong Yimo smiled awkwardly. She didn't care about the affection between siblings. She just couldn't let go of the knot in her heart. After talking it out, the awkwardness between the two wasn't so bad anymore. However, how to solve this problem was still a problem. They couldn't just let it go like this. Gong Yimo was silent, so was Gong Chung. In the end, it was Gong Yimo who spoke first. Father, I've always respected you, and I know it's not easy for you. I've given you so much trouble all these years. Gong Chung didn't expect Gong Yimo to say such a sentence. Although his face was still very serious, his expression unconsciously eased a lot. What nonsense are you talking about? You're my daughter. What's there to implicate? Gong Yimo suddenly got up from the bed, then knelt in front of Gong Chung and directly kowtowed. Father, this son is unfilial. I made you angry. Gong Chung couldn't keep his face anymore. Okay, get up first. No, this son has a request. Gong Chung looked at her and frowned. Say it. Gong Yimo propped up her upper body and said word by word. I didn't have a mother since I was a child, and I grew up in the cold palace. I resented you at first, but I won't forget that when I was sick, you pushed back the morning court and stayed by my bed for a day and a night. I also won't forget that you repeatedly defended me in front of the court. At that time, on the heaven-seeking platform, even if it was raining heavily, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, you still fought for me. In fact, for me, you've done a lot. Her words were very sincere because Gong Chung wasn't her biological father after all. However, her biological father might not have done as well as him. Moreover, in addition to being her father, he was also the monarch. The country was his most important thing. As long as it didn't involve the country's affairs, he was really good to her. This time, it was her who touched the emperor's reverse scale. Gong Chung felt guilty when he heard this. He felt that he didn't do well. Yesterday, he even wanted to poison her to death. Get up, Emor, this matter is my fault. even if it was really to solve the problem. So he had to kill her? Gongcheng suddenly felt that yesterday's idea was too terrible and cold-blooded. Gong Yimo smiled. You didn't do anything wrong. You've already done very well. If I were you, I might have done the same. Moreover, in the end, you still didn't do it. Even if I'm not your biological daughter, your care for me is no less than any of your sisters. Her words shocked Gongcheng. Nonsense. What do you mean you're not my biological daughter? Who said that? He immediately suspected that it was the Empress. Gong Yimo shook her head. Imperial Mother told me before she died, but it doesn't matter. I said so much just now to tell you that you're very good to me. So it doesn't matter whether I'm your biological daughter or not. And I don't want to hurt anyone in this matter, so my only solution is to leave here and build the national highway. She lowered her eyelids and said softly, Perhaps as long as I leave and Crown Prince Gige gets married, he'll gradually calm down. She still believed in Su Miaolan's methods. Seeing that she was going to leave again, Gongcheng's originally turbulent heart suddenly became reluctant. His daughter had only been with Lu Yi for half a year, and now she was going to leave again, but she was right. If she didn't leave, this matter would simply not be resolved. Now, he only hoped that after Che got married, he would be able to calm down. He should also find a wife for Gong Dai as soon as possible. The room suddenly fell silent. Finally, Gongcheng said, The national highway. Jin will do it. He thought for a moment. Jin will ask people to survey the route and have the towns along the way widen the official road. When the time comes, those mountains that can't be crossed can be slowly dug. There will be a time when they can be dug through. Gong Yimo opened her eyes and looked at him, as if asking why he was doing this. Gongcheng sighed and said somewhat helplessly, Jin is old and useless, and Gong Dai and Gong Che have more and more power in their hands. As long as you're still in Daiyu State, Jin can't control them. It's Jun who's useless. The more he said, the more guilty he felt, but his thoughts were very calm. Because he couldn't control them, Gong Yimo could only hide away from Daiyu State, leave her homeland. Was this considered being expelled? Gong Yimo's little face was pale, and her body was a little shaky. She originally thought that in Daiyu State, she would occasionally be able to see Gong Dai. Now that she thought about it, it was really... She didn't think it through enough. Gong Yimo smiled bitterly. The emperor didn't want her to marry any of his sons, even if she had already made it clear that she wasn't his biological daughter. Also, the emperor had always treated her as his biological daughter, so in his heart, son and daughter couldn't be together. If they were to be separated, then they should be separated completely. Was it really fate that didn't work out? Chapter 413. Gong Yimo looked at the emperor coldly, and the emperor lowered his head guiltily. I'm sorry. Jin really can't help it. She could hear the deep helplessness in his voice. If you were in Daiyu State, Gong Dai would definitely look for you. If something really happened between you and Gong Dai, would Che just sit by and do nothing? If you were in Daiyu State, it would be a dispute. Do you have the heart? Do you have the heart to see Daiyu State in turmoil because of you? His words were so serious that Gong Yimo couldn't breathe. She wasn't willing. It wasn't easy to stabilize the country. She didn't want to avenge her brothers even when she was tortured to death. At this moment, how could she be willing to cause internal strife because of personal feelings? At that moment, Gong Yimo's heart was struggling like never before. Clearly, every time she left before, she was so free and easy. Why was she so sad this time? She closed her eyes and heard her own voice. Imperial Father, I heard that Yu Qi's internal strife is endless. This son is willing to represent Daiyu State to go and help the neighboring country. Emperor Cheng's voice was a little dejected. After a while, he said with a pale face, Okay. At this moment, Changshi exclaimed, Prince, why are you here? Changshi secretly cursed his bad luck. He just personally went to bring the medicine over. Why did he see Gong Dai standing at the door when he came back? Could it be that he heard the conversation inside, just now? Emperor Cheng and Gong Yimo were also shocked. They both had the same thought. Emperor Cheng was even more nervous. He was afraid that Gong Dai would hear that Gong Yimo wasn't his biological daughter. Then, with Gong Dai's temperament, he wouldn't let it go. Gong Yimo glanced at Emperor Chung, got up, and opened the door. Sure enough, as soon as she opened the door, she saw Gong Dai standing there silently, with a cold expression. He looked as usual, but Gong Yimo seemed to be able to feel his sadness. Could it be that he really heard everything? He didn't even look at the emperor and directly ran out with Gong Yimo. Emperor Chung was shocked and quickly got up to chase after them. But how could Changshi agree? He hurriedly stopped the emperor, put the medicine bowl aside, and said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, don't worry. This servant will chase them back. Go!" Gong Chung hurriedly shouted, fearing that something unexpected would happen. On the other side, Gong Yimo was carried by Gong Dai and moved forward with lightness skill. Gong Yimo's mind was quickly thinking of countermeasures, so she didn't say a word. But she saw that the surrounding scenery was becoming more and more familiar. This is the Cold Palace? Gong Yimo was stunned. She never came back to the Cold Palace after leaving. Now, there was no trace of the tragedy she caused when she left. The courtyard they lived in at that time was very clean, and some decorations were still in place. For example, the wrought tin rocking chair under the tree, the small stone table under the flower rack. Each of them was made by their own hands. They were full of memories. She didn't expect that all of this would be so well preserved. Needless to say, it must be Gong Dai's idea. He still kept everything here. For some reason, Gong Yimo's heart warmed. She suddenly felt that even if Gong Dai knew the truth, it didn't matter. When they arrived at the place, Gong Yimo naturally walked to the flower rack. When she was a child, Gong Dai always practiced calligraphy here, and she would lie on the rocking chair to read. She didn't expect it to be here. There were still brushes and white paper on the table, as if they just left yesterday. Gong Dai stood behind her. The sun shone on his body, as if it brought out a halo. His skin was very white, and under the contrast of his black clothes, there was an extreme contrast of beauty. The creator really had a special favor for him. Even if he was expressionless, no one would treat this handsome young man as a villain. Royal sister, do you still remember what you said last night? Gong Yimo's hand had just touched the brush when she heard Gong Dai's cold voice. She understood immediately. It seemed that Gong Dai didn't hear what she said before. He only heard that she asked to go to Yuchi, so he asked. Gong Yimo wanted to explain, but when she looked back, she saw the hostility in Gong Dai's eyes. The calmness he exuded was cracking inch by inch. Gong Yimo couldn't help but take a step back. She heard his hushed voice. "Actually, you don't have to do this. As long as you agree, tomorrow morning, you will be the mistress of Dai Yu State. You won't have to be controlled by anyone anymore." As he spoke, he approached her. His slightly cold and delicate eyebrows looked so dangerous at this time. The layers of increasing cold air made Gong Yimo almost breathless. "What do you want to do?" Gong Yimo widened her eyes. Gong Dai smiled. "Royal sister, don't be afraid. Just stay here, and you won't hear anything." Then when she woke up tomorrow, there would be corpses everywhere, and there would be a change of regime? You want to rebel? Gong Dai, are you crazy? Gong Dai shook his head. "I'm not crazy. Don't be afraid. For you, even if I'm abandoned by the world, even if others say that I'm muddle-headed, perverted, and reckless, I'm willing to do anything. As long as you agree, I'm willing to do anything." He was serious. He really wanted to change the regime, just so that she wouldn't go to Yuchi. He didn't want to suffer the pain of missing her anymore. At that moment, Gong Yimo was really afraid. Gong Dai's entire body was exuding a kind of restrained madness and overwhelming murderous intent. He was too scary. "You want me to agree? You want me to agree to you killing the emperor, the crown prince, and becoming the emperor?" Gong Dai's lips curled up slightly, and he smiled. At such a dangerous moment, his smile was as dazzling as the bright afternoon, but it gave people a bone-chilling feeling. "Royal sister, I want you to agree to be my woman." He stared at Gong Yimo anxiously. "I'll let concubine Li's foolish son become the emperor, and I'll be the regent. When that time comes, no one will dare to stop us. We can travel around the world. He wouldn't have to endure so much anymore. He's really crazy. Gong Yimo's heart froze. She admitted that one day was enough for Gong Dai to make a coup, but those who supported the crown prince and the emperor would still retaliate. When that time came, it wouldn't be as simple as a coup. Those families would resist with all their might, and they would encourage the people to protect the emperor. They would riot and break apart like what happened in Yuchi. Even if all this wasn't a big problem for Gong Dai, and he would definitely be the final winner, millions of people would lose their lives because of it. I don't agree with your suggestion. After thinking through all this, Gong Yimo looked at him and calmly and resolutely made her stand clear. She didn't agree. Gong Dai's lips curled up, and he stepped closer until her entire body was pressed against the stone table. Only then did he tilt his head and reveal a pure and clean smile. But the words that came out of his mouth made one's scalp tingle. So royal sister chose to leave me? Do you really want me to chain you to my bed for you to understand that my suppressed desire for you has reached its peak? Chapter 414. What? Gong Ju's words broke through all of Gong Yimo's defenses. She was forced to lie down on the stone table, but Gong Ju once again approached her. The distance between the two was so close that their breaths intertwined. What did he mean by his desire had reached its limit? Did he have to be so shameful? Wait a minute. Was this the time to consider whether or not it was shameful? She had to think about how to pacify the beast in front of her, who was about to explode at any time. Gong Yimo's toes touched the ground, and she was already half sitting on the stone table. Her hands were on the table, and her upper body was leaning back. Gong Dai didn't budge an inch, and he reached out and bent over her, not giving her a chance to escape. At this moment, there was no one around, and they could clearly hear the chirping of cicadas and birds. Above them was a lush vine shelf, and the mottled sunlight shone down on his face, giving him a sense of tranquility. If one ignored the growing madness in his eyes, this scene was really warm and ambiguous. He raised a hand and placed it on Gong Yimo's hair, gently tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear, and very gently discussed with her. I'll give you one more chance, royal sister. You have two choices. 1, stay and leave everything to me. 2, I'll tie you to my bed, and from then on, you and I will entangle each and every night. What do you choose? Is there a third option? Gong Yimo asked weakly. Gong Dai smiled a little bloodthirstily. His royal sister was always like this, never knowing what fear was. Gong Yimo regretted the moment she asked. Just as she was about to say something to salvage the situation, Gong Dai took away her belt. Wait a minute. What was he doing? Tying her up in the open. Before she could say anything, the next second, Gong Ju's belt fell on her face. Gong Ju had blindfolded her. What kind of shameful position was this? Before she could react, Gong Dai's deep voice gently rang in her ear. Royal sister, do you know? What did he know? Gong Yimo lifted her head with her eyes covered. She did not know how enchanting the face that was so close to hers was. When he no longer restrained his desire, that cold face suddenly burned with vitality. It was as seductive as a demon. His bright, thin lips lightly touched Gong Yimo's white, jade-like earlobe, and he used a very low and ambiguous tone to tell her. Every time I see you, I'm imagining you naked. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo's face turned red when she heard that. She flew into a rage out of embarrassment. She reached out to pull off the belt on her face, but Gong Dai was even angrier than her. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against the stone table behind her. He pressed his body on top of hers, causing Gong Yimo to lie on the stone table. Her legs were hanging in the air, while Gong Dai stood between her legs, his hands pressing down on her hands. This position was simply too embarrassing. Royal sister, it seems like you don't know how angry I am. That's why you're testing my limits again and again. Gong Yimo's legs moved, but she realized that her entire body was pinned to the table by Gong Dai. She did not dare to move. She could not see anything, and she could not resist. There were still so many things to settle. Gong Yimo pouted and said in a wrong tone, "You're blaming me? I'm also helpless." Gong Yimo felt extremely wronged. What did it mean by disaster falling from the sky? This was disaster falling from the sky. I didn't do anything, but Imperial Father wants to kill me. Do I have to kill him because of this? Why does he want to kill me? Isn't it because of you? Because of Gong Che? Gong Yimo pouted. Why am I always the one getting hurt? Imperial Father doesn't want me to be entangled with any of you. Gong Che clearly said that he would let go, but he still didn't. You want to kill Imperial Father, and the Crown Prince will cause chaos in Dayu State. I can't accept that. How can I do that? What else could she do other than leave? Watch as Gong Dai and the Crown Prince break up? The more she spoke, the more wrong she felt. Although her eyes could not be seen, they must be misty and pitiful right now. Anyone who saw them would feel their heart soften. Seeing that Gong Dai did not speak, Gong Yimo felt extremely pitiful. She held back her tears and spoke in a hoarse voice. I also want to have a simple relationship with you. Don't say any more. Gong Dai lowered his head and kissed her lips. She did not know that her words were enough to soothe all the unwillingness and hostility in him. It was as if he was willing to continue waiting and give up everything just to fall in love with her, just because she said, I want to have a simple relationship with you. Gong Dai's body was very hot and very stiff. However, his kiss was very wanton and deeply entangled. He did not allow her to retreat at all. Under the lingering kiss, Gong Yimo's originally wronged heart became even more wronged. She also wanted to have a simple relationship with him, but she did not dare to, especially when the other party was him. However, she could not let go of him. She did not want to see rivers of blood flow because of this affair. She was also very sad, very innocent, and very hurt. Very wronged. Gong Dai's hand gradually loosened and Gong Yimo also reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Her obedience made Gong Dai's heart feel both pain and sweetness. He really did not want to do anything that would make her heart, which had been half melted, rise again. However, if he did not do anything, she would leave him again. This feeling was too painful and too addictive. After the kiss, Gong Ju raised his head to look at her. At this time, her red lips were slightly parted, and she was gasping for air like a fish out of oxygen. Her eyes were covered, and the dark green belt set off her white, jade-like face. Her faint red lips were even more deadly. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but at the right moment, he could not continue like this. He was afraid that he would not be able to resist taking her now. He did not want to endure anymore. Since Royal Sister was not willing to make a choice, then he would make a choice for her. Thinking like this, he turned around to leave. He had to think of a way to make sure that the Crown Prince and the Emperor would not be able to escape. If Royal Sister did not want him to kill them, then fine. Then he would put them under house arrest. What rivers of blood? What internal strife? What did it matter? He was already going crazy, and he should have done this long ago. Sensing that Gong Dai was about to leave, Gong Yimo hurriedly hooked her legs around him. With a pull of her hands, she forced Gong Dai to return to his previous position. However, with Gong Yimo's legs wrapped around his waist, this position was even more provocative than before. This time, Gong Yimo could even more directly feel the changes in his body that he was deliberately avoiding. Her face turned even redder. Gong Dai gritted his teeth. Royal Sister, what are you doing? She was seducing him. She was seducing him. Gong Yimo did not know how to answer. Her mind was in a mess, and so was her heart. However, she was very clear that she could not let Gong Dai leave like this. But there were some things that she wanted to say. Gong Dai's Adam's apple moved slightly. Her current appearance was too seductive, and it made him unable to restrain himself. Finally, she moved. She raised her left hand and placed it in front of him. Chapter 415. Under Gong Dai's puzzled gaze, her right hand gently lifted up the sleeve of her left hand. The red dot on the inside of her fair little arm was a shocking red. You said you want me to choose, so I agree to be your woman. As long as you want, you can wipe this red dot off my body right now. Her slow and firm voice fell, and in the next second, her body was lifted up, causing her to let out a soft cry. Gong Dai actually carried her up. Then he kicked open the tightly shut door and walked into the room. Damn, this is the rhythm of directly taking action. Before she could think of anything, in the next second, her back softened and Gong Yimo was pressed down on the bed by Gong Dai. Because she couldn't see Gong Dai's face, but the shocking heat from his body was like a volcanic eruption, almost melting her. Gong Dai directly pressed her down on the bed and kissed her. His hands also tore off her clothes, and his actions were so urgent that it was as if he wanted to directly tear her apart and eat her up. When he encountered a knot that he couldn't untie, he directly tore it, and the brocade in his hands was torn into pieces. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was that Gong Yimo said that he could break her chastity mark right now. This excessive passion made Gong Yimo's entire body tense up. Gong Dai's passionate kiss went from her lips to her neck and collarbone, then down. Following that, she felt a chill in front of her chest. He was about to start. At that moment, Gong Dai stopped and pressed down on her body, carefully admiring the beautiful scene in front of him. What a beautiful color! His royal sister had already grown up, and she was exactly the same as he imagined. Gong Yimo's hands clenched into fists. In this kind of summer, she was so nervous that she broke out in a cold sweat. How would Gong Dai treat her next? Directly eat her up? She didn't dare to think about it. At this moment, Gong Dai's scorching body temperature came closer again, and his slightly hurried breath hit her neck. That numbing itch made her unconsciously bite her lower lip. Perhaps in the next second, he would press down on her and melt her like before. Why are you doing this? After a long time, she suddenly heard Gong Dai's voice. Gong Yimo's tense body suddenly relaxed as Gong Dai straightened his upper body. She was so nervous that she couldn't open her mouth. Gong Dai's fingers had already landed on her skin, teasing her repeatedly. You're clearly not ready. You're clearly trying to resist. Royal sister, what's the knot in your heart? Why can't you accept me completely? Gong Yimo took a deep breath and spoke slowly. I've already accepted you. Gong Dai sneered, liar. His expression became sorrowful. That feeling of helplessness was as if he had been forced to the edge of a cliff by the other party, and the other party was still pushing him into the abyss, especially when that person was his beloved. You want to give yourself to me to appease me so that you can go to Jade Chi smoothly. You wanted to get my hands on you and then leave. You're so carefree, so cruel. At the end, Gong Yimo could clearly feel his anger and pain. His next sentence, however, made Gong Yimo's heart skip a beat. Sometimes, I really want to kill you and then die with you. Dying together is better than enduring all of this alive. His voice became low, and there was a loneliness that was hard to ignore. It was hard to imagine that such a strong person like him would actually have such thoughts of escaping. It was real and scary. He looked at Gong Yimo's pale face, and the corners of his mouth were full of self-mockery. Perhaps all of this was just him forcing himself. Royal sister never loved him at all. He was the one who had been forcing her, and that was why it was like this. What a pitiful truth. Hearing Gong Dai's mocking laughter, Gong Yimo's heart ached. She thought about it seriously, and then spoke calmly. Honestly, I was planning to give myself to you, appease you, and then go to Jade Chi, as expected. At that moment, Gong Dai felt that all the energy in his body had been sucked out. Sitting on her body, the distance between them was so close, yet so far. However, at this moment, Gong Yimo got up, wrapped her arms around his neck, and laughed softly. Her laughter became louder and louder, like a silver bell, very pleasing to the ear. You fool! As she spoke, she leaned forward and accurately found Gong Dai's lips, teasing him. Soon, Gong Dai's desire, which had calmed down, began to boil again. Feeling that he had turned the tables, and was even crazily bloodthirsty, biting her lips until they were numb and painful, Gong Yimo avoided him and said again, You fool! So be it. You just wanted to have her. So what if he forced himself? He had already been poisoned by her, and she was his only salvation. Other than pestering her, there was only death. So before he died, he would pester her. Moreover, she was the one who took the initiative to come to him. Gong Yimo was once again pushed down by him. She felt that he was going to continue without saying anything. Gong Yimo laughed softly. Fool, you're usually so smart. Why did you make a mistake in this matter? I'm not smart. Gong Dai thought that if he was smart enough, he would have figured out where the royal sister's knot was. She was taking the initiative, and it didn't seem like she cared about blood relatives. Gong Yimo held his face with one hand, and for the first time, she completely opened her heart. Fool, I really want to go to Jade Chi. First, I really want to help Jade Chi, and second, I want to think of a plan after I leave. I want to be with you, but I don't want to feel burdened. So I want to resolve this matter peacefully. Do you understand? I'm using my body to comfort you, but it's because I like you that I'm willing to do this. Fool, I'm offering myself in advance so that you won't have to worry. MPH. Her lips were passionately sealed. Before Gong Dai went crazy, he was still thinking that he didn't want to leave her mouth again. He didn't want her to speak again. Her words made him unable to resist at all. She could subvert his thoughts with just a few words, and he was utterly defeated. He should have blocked her mouth so that she couldn't do anything but kiss him. But the sweetness in his heart couldn't lie. She said that she liked him and wanted to be with him after this matter was resolved. She was even willing to offer herself in advance so that he wouldn't have to worry. Was there anything else that could make him happier than this? A second ago, he was still in hell, but now he was in paradise. His baby's mouth was too sweet. But at this moment, the sound of fighting came from outside. Chong. She had caught up with him. In fact, he had caught up with him a long time ago. The reason why he was so late was because he was stopped by Gong Dai's secret guards. After Chong, she finished them off. He was stopped by the last two men by Gong Dai's side, and they started fighting in the courtyard. Gong Yimo was anxious. Everyone by Gong Dai's side was important, and she couldn't lose them here. So she got up, hugged Gong Dai, and kissed him fiercely. Gong Dai was so excited by her passion that he couldn't even hear the fighting outside. Chapter 416. Gong Dai, listen to me. Leave this matter to me. Once Yu Chi is done, I'll be with you regardless of whether Gong Che will let go or not. She didn't wait for Gong Ju to respond. She hugged him and kissed him fiercely. Don't hurt them. I'll find a way to solve this. Going to Yu Chi is my last wish. As for the knot in my heart, I'll tell you personally when Yu Chi comes back. Deal? How could he not make a deal? Gong Ju had already been devoured by her few kisses and a few words. He only caught the main point after a while. When you come back from Yu Chi, will you tell me the knot in your heart? Will you still be with me? Gong Dai asked carefully. He was like a completely different person from the devil who looked like he was going to destroy the world. He was really too cute. If the timing was right, Gong Yimo would have given herself to him. She hugged his neck and kissed him again. While a fight was going on outside, the two people inside were entangled with each other. The ambiguous sounds of kissing between the sheets made Gong Yimo blush and her heart skip a beat. Stop kissing. I can't stop them outside. Gong Yimo forced herself to wake up, but she could not help kissing him again after they separated. It was as if they were going to separate in the next second. Don't be like this. I can't take it anymore. Gong Yimo's cat-like moans almost made Gong Dai break down. He stared at the seductress in his arms who only knew how to provoke him. His eyes were filled with helplessness. What could he do? Wasn't it because he spoiled her? Answer my question. His breath seemed to be on fire, causing Gong Yimo, who was close by, to feel like she was being burned by him. Promise, promise. When you come back, I'll tell you everything and be with you. Gong Ju was satisfied with her answer, but when he thought of her leaving, he almost went crazy. I'll look for you when the time comes. Gong Yimo smiled mischievously. They're in the middle of a civil war. Wouldn't a dangerous person like you be adding fuel to the fire? Don't worry, I'll definitely summon you when I need your help. The sounds of fighting outside were getting closer and closer. Gong Dai gritted his teeth. It's a deal. He would wait one last time. Who asked this little demoness to be so powerful that he was completely taken advantage of. Gong Yimo was satisfied. She hugged and kissed him again. It's a promise. With this kiss, the two of them once again embraced each other. She was about to go crazy. Would Gong Dai do something to Gong Yimo in a fit of anger? He didn't dare to think about it anymore, and his moves became even fiercer. Moreover, Gong Dai actually brought his secret guards into the palace, and all of them were so powerful. What was his intention? Just as he was about to kill him, the door opened and Gong Dai walked out. When he came out, both sides stopped. She saw that Gong Dai's clothes were neat and tidy and sighed in relief. Then he said angrily, "Prince of Qi, you rashly snatched the princess away from His Majesty. What are your intentions?" Gong Dai looked at him coldly. Anyone who wanted to separate him from his royal sister was not a good person. Without waiting for Gong Dai to offend them, Gong Yimo quickly ran out. Fortunately, her outer clothes were not torn, otherwise she would be too ashamed to see anyone. Eunuch Changshi. Gong Yimo sighed softly. After calming down, she said, "Imperial father is anxious, right? It's all my fault. Gong Dai also had an urgent matter to discuss with me. Now that the matter is resolved, I will go and ask for Imperial father's forgiveness." Seeing that Gong Yimo was unharmed, Changshi also sighed in relief. However, he still looked at Gong Dai warily and said to Gong Yimo, "Since the matter is resolved, princess, please go. His Majesty is waiting for you." Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai's extremely cold expression and smiled. "Okay, I'll go now." She had just walked past Gong Dai when her hand was grabbed by Gong Dai. On the other side, Changshi was immediately on guard. "Prince of Qi, what do you mean by this?" However, Gong Dai did not pay attention to him. He only reached out to tidy up Gong Yimo's messy hair and confirmed once again, "You're not lying to me?" Those contrasting black and white eyes were filled with seriousness. When he looked at Gong Yimo, she had the urge to pounce on him again. She nodded repeatedly. "I'm not lying to you. I'm not lying to you. If I lie, I'm a dog." Only then did Gong Dai frown and let go somewhat reluctantly. "Then I'll go and build roads. I'll use manpower to excavate them," he said. Deep in his cold eyes, there was love like water. "As long as it's something you want to do and you can't do it, I'll do it for you." This sentence was simply too much. Gong Yimo felt like she was being flirted with. How could there be such a considerate man like Gong Dai in this world? "That's too awesome. I'd better give you my virginity." Gong Yimo originally wanted to say this. After all, it would save a lot of effort. However, when she saw Changshi glaring at her from the side, she swallowed the rest of her words. She said to Gong Dai, "I know you still have a lot of things to do. Go and do it. We'll talk about it next time." Gong Dai nodded. Then he watched as Gong Yimo and Changshi left. Slowly, his brows relaxed and revealed a trace of a smile. He hoped that Yuchi's matter would end soon. When the time came, he would look for Royal Sister to fulfill his promise. Because Royal Sister always did what she said, he would endure it one last time. When Gong Yimo returned, Gong Chung was pacing back and forth in the room. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that something was wrong. He had to send Gong Yimo away as soon as possible. When Gong Yimo returned, he was obviously worried, but he glared at her. "You still know to come back?" Jin asks you. "What did Gong Dai say to you? Did he hear the secret or not?" Gong Yimo saw his nervous appearance and knew that he was really afraid that she would get together with his son. She couldn't help but sigh. He didn't hear it. "He only heard that I was going to Yuchi, so he pulled me aside and asked." "That's it?" The emperor expressed that he didn't believe it at all. Gong Dai liked Gong Yimo. Would he just let her go like that? Gong Yimo said, "I lied to him and said that Yuchi asked me to help. After all, your daughter is so powerful, isn't she?" She forced a smile, and Gong Dai has already agreed to build the road. Hearing her say this, Gong Chung still stared at her with some worry. "What about you?" "Me?" Gong Yimo was stunned by his question. "Didn't you say you also have feelings for Gong Dai, and you're willing to let go just like that?" Gong Chung stared at her seriously, not missing any expression on her face. Gong Yimo was silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed. Imperial father, Imo has already sworn that she won't marry. So what if I have feelings for him? After all, he will not belong to me. At the end, her tone was self-deprecating and bitter, which made Gong Cheng's heart ache. They were both flesh and blood. He really didn't want to hurt any of them. Gong Cheng personally helped Gong Yimo up and sighed. Imo, it's not that Jun is forcing you, but there are so many men in the world. Gong Dai is not a good choice. I hope you can understand what Jun means. Chapter 417. Seeing Gong Yimo's silence, he continued, "In the future, don't say anything about not marrying. My daughter naturally has to marry. How about this? When you come back from Yuchi, I will choose a husband for you." Then he secretly made a decision in his heart. Gong Che was about to get married. He was not very worried, but Gong Dai. He had a bit of a headache. Gong Dai had a lot of military power in his hands. This was his trust in him. But now, if he did not handle it well, it was very likely to lead to a disaster. Whatever. He had to force Gong Dai to marry. Gong Yimo nodded indifferently. Anyway, Yuchi's internal strife was over, and she seemed to have nothing to do. When the time comes, she would go out to sea with Gong Dai. Whatever power and status, she could hand it all over. Seeing her so docile, the emperor was still a little uneasy. In that case, we will set off in 3 days. Gong Yimo was stunned. 3 days later, his brother crown prince's wedding banquet. She saw Emperor Gong's serious eyes, and her voice paused. Well, it might be better if she did not appear. Forget it, they were not the same kind of people. She did not have to go to other people's wedding. After all, she regarded him as her brother, but he did not think the same way. If there were any consequences, it would be her fault. As you wish, Gong Yimo finally said helplessly. In that case, I have decided to go to Yuchi alone, without any troops. How can that be? Emperor Gong disagreed. Now that Yuchi is in internal strife, war is about to break out. How can you not lead troops? Gong Yimo glanced at Chang Shi beside her. Father Emperor, now my martial arts are about the same as eunuch Chang Shi. If I bring people, it will be a burden. Her words surprised the emperor. Chang Shi was 70 years old. He started practicing martial arts when he was 10 years old, and now he has 60 years of skill. Imo was so young, but she was comparable to him? Gong Cheng couldn't help but look at Chang Shi. Chang Shi nodded. He could feel that the princess's martial arts were amazing. Although she was young, her internal force was vigorous and solid. It was not a quick technique. It seemed that the princess was a talented person. Hearing Chang Shi say so, Gong Cheng thought about it and agreed, but he felt a little uneasy in his heart. In his impression, Gong Yimo's martial arts were high, but it was only 1/3 of Chang Shi's level. Now that he heard that her martial arts were on par with Chang Shi, he suddenly had an uncontrollable feeling in his heart. It seemed that he had to take advantage of the time when Imo was not around to get his 2 sons back. Only then could he be at ease handing over the power. Otherwise, even if he died, he would not be able to rest in peace. If there's nothing else, I'll go back and prepare, Gong Yimo said. The emperor nodded and let her go. Looking at her back as she left, the worry he had for her disappeared, and he couldn't bear to see her like this. What's wrong with me? Why am I so suspicious of my little daughter? She's obviously a good child. In the end, I'm the one who let her down. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The entire imperial city was very lively. Everyone was happy for the crown prince's wedding. Su Miaolan's red dress covered the entire street. The common people were talking about it with great relish. Everyone was beaming with joy. The crown prince was going to get married. The common people were very respectful to the crown prince. Not to mention other things, because of the developed waterways, they were willing to work hard and earn money. All kinds of goods from the south and north were dazzling. The quality of life was greatly improved. Therefore, in the common people's hearts, the crown prince was a good crown prince. They all liked him very much. On the other side, Gong Yimo was saying goodbye to Gong Dai. Gong Dai would soon go to build the road. So after today's parting, she didn't know when she would see him again. Gong Dai saw that she didn't bring anything but a horse. Although he knew that she had space, he still couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He took out a stack of banknotes and gave it to her. He frowned and said, "We have a shop in Yuchi. When the time comes, you just have to reveal your identity and ask them to do anything. You're not allowed to be brave. If it's not necessary, you're not allowed to disguise yourself. You can't let me not get any news about you, understand?" Gong Yimo quickly nodded. "You're good looking. Whatever you say goes." Gong Dai originally wanted to frown, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. "Royal sister, please get this done quickly. Otherwise, I'll come and find you personally." The reason why he applied to build the road was because it was convenient for him to leave. In the capital, his every move couldn't be hidden from everyone. However, it was different when he went out. The road could be handed over to his subordinates to build, and he could go wherever he wanted. When Gong Yimo thought that Gong Dai would come and find her, she didn't know why her body trembled. He could come, but she didn't know if he could keep a low profile. "Don't worry, I'll definitely get this done quickly. When the time comes, I'll come and find you." Gong Yimo patted her chest and promised. Gong Dai pursed his lips and smiled. His smile was so clear that Gong Yimo was stunned. "What are you smiling about? Shouldn't you be a little sad when parting?" Gong Dai's eyes were fixed on her. His black and white eyes were filled with her reflection. It was as if she was his entire world. "I'm smiling. In the future, I really won't listen to my husband's orders." Gong Yimo's face flushed red. Wasn't this guy thinking too far ahead? "Royal sister," Gong Dai came closer and hugged her gently. "You must remember that I love you very much." These few words were light, but they were as heavy as 1,000 pounds. It warmed Gong Yimo's heart. She hugged him and nodded solemnly. "Don't worry, I definitely won't look at other men. Anyway, no matter how good-looking they are, they're not as good-looking as you." Gong Dai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After hugging her for a while, he finally let go of her. He looked down and traced Gong Yimo's eyes. There was a kind of reluctance and satisfaction. "Come back soon." Puffed. "Why do I feel like you're a wife sending her husband off on a long journey?" Gong Dai raised his eyebrows in a very good-natured manner. "As long as we're husband and wife, anything is fine." He was too good at talking. Gong Yimo glared at him. His handsome face was very serious. He was good-looking and good at talking. It was simply cheating. "I'm leaving." She couldn't stay any longer. If she stayed any longer, she wouldn't be able to leave. Gong Dai didn't say anything. He just watched her leave coldly. He reached into his pocket and took out a piece of paper. Gong Yimo had stuffed it into his pocket just now. Gong Dai took it out and saw that it was a matching picture. His expression turned serious. He took a closer look and burned the paper. "Royal sister." She actually gave him her virginity. At this moment, Gong Yimo, who had walked far away, turned back and saw Gong Dai standing there. Although she couldn't see his expression clearly, she knew that he was definitely watching her and watching her leave. His black clothes and the green marble palace door blended into one. The sky was very gloomy, but that cold youth seemed to glow. His aura was very eye-catching. Perhaps she could really trust him? Trust him. He was someone she could entrust her life to. Chapter 418. Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. Guests came and went in an endless stream, but the Crown Prince didn't greet them. Instead, he waited at the door for someone. But in the end, he heard a voice. It was his imperial father who came. All along, the emperor was very amiable to the Crown Prince. But today, although he didn't say anything, the Crown Prince could feel the emperor's dissatisfaction. Since the emperor is here, Gong Che must go in. He took one last look outside, a little worried. Why hasn't Imo come yet? Sensing his movement, Emperor Cheng stopped. "What's wrong?" Gong Che didn't hide it and said directly, "Imperial Father, I don't know why Imo hasn't come yet. Is she not feeling well?" Emperor Cheng sneered. "She won't come." Gong Che looked up and saw Emperor Cheng's cold and solemn eyes. "Yuchi sent someone to ask for help, so I sent Imo. It was an emergency, so I just set off and didn't have time to announce it." Gong Che was shocked. You said Mo or went to Yuchi? He looked a little flustered. But today is Son's wedding day. Why didn't she stay for one more day? It's your wedding, not Immerse. Don't tell me you don't want to get married if she's not here. Emperor Cheng snorted. His words made Gong Che speechless. Gong Che calmed down and thought carefully. He guessed that something must have happened. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so eager to send her away. Without waiting for him to react, Emperor Cheng went in first. Gong Che was still standing in the same place, thinking, could it be that Su Miaolon told Imperial Father the fact that he likes Mo? No, it's impossible. He kept a close eye on Su Miaolon and completely eliminated such a possibility. Then what's the reason that Imperial Father can't wait to send Mo away, hide it from him, and show dissatisfaction with him? On the streets, Gong Yimo was listening to the joyous sounds. It was a little surreal for her to be in the middle of it all. When she married Gong Che, it wasn't lively at all, but she didn't care. She only thought that marrying him was enough. On their wedding night, he said to her, I will never let you down in this life. When she heard about it, she was so happy that she couldn't control herself. Now that she thought about it, it was really like a faded old photo. It was so long ago that it seemed like it had happened in her previous life. No, it was something that happened in his previous life. At this moment, a group of children ran past her cheerfully. It turned out that the bridal sedan chair had arrived. The maids were throwing money and sugar. The children crowded around and played, making the banquet even livelier. The long red line was endless. It was exquisite and luxurious, and its momentum was vast. From this, it could be seen how much Su Miaolon was favored. Gong Yimo, who was leading her horse, met the other party on a narrow path. She smiled faintly and stepped aside. She was wearing a scarf, so no one could see her expression. Only Gong Yimo knew in her heart that she had completely let go of Gong Che. That was why she could be so calm. The feelings from her previous life had long been extinguished by the flames of war. In the end, her hatred was only because she was unwilling to accept it. Those people were no longer her burden. If others didn't offend her, she wouldn't offend them. Other than Gong Dai, she had this principle for everyone. The moment the guard of honor passed by Gong Yimo, Su Miaolon seemed to feel something. She lifted the veil and the curtains of the sedan chair and looked out. She saw Gong Yimo at a glance. She frowned. She felt that the woman seemed to be Gong Yimo. But how could it be? Gong Yimo was going to see her marry the crown prince today. Su Miaolon lowered the veil and smirked proudly. Later, the crown prince would personally come to the entrance of the palace to welcome the bride. As long as she got down from the sedan chair, she would be the crown princess. Countless women would be envious and in awe of her. From now on, she would be the third most respected woman in the entire palace. Only she, Su Miaolon, could bear such a great honor. What Gu country's princess? Wouldn't she have to obediently call her sister-in-law in the future? The auspicious hour was approaching. The emperor was overseeing the Eastern Palace, so it was time for Gong Che to get up and receive the bride. Surrounded by the crowd, he was wearing a wedding robe. However, his expression was gloomy and his thoughts had long drifted away. He thought about it and felt that he had been exposed. Otherwise, Imperial Father wouldn't have sent Immerse away in such a hurry. Even if he found out that Gong Dai liked Immerse, Imperial Father wouldn't have such a big reaction. Perhaps Imperial Father knew everything? If Imperial Father knew, then Immerse would have left willingly. She must know that he hadn't let go of her and had followed the Emperor's arrangements. The more Gong Che thought about it, the more frightened he became. The palace gates were right in front of him. He could even hear the joyous sounds coming from outside. The glaring red color coming from afar made his scalp tingle. Beside him was the sound of compliments and laughter, but he couldn't hear a single word. He only stared at the wedding procession that was getting closer and closer. His heart suddenly ached. Why wasn't the woman in the sedan chair Immerse? Clearly, the one he wanted to marry the most. The only one he wanted to marry was Immerse. But now, he could only marry another daughter. And Immerse was likely to be forced to go to Yuchi because of his exposure. This wasn't fair. Not fair. When Gong Che arrived at the gate, Su Miaolon's guard of honor had just arrived. There were people everywhere. There were commoners watching the excitement, neatly dressed wedding procession, and imperial guards maintaining order. She wasn't there. She wasn't there. Gong Che only felt that his heart was so stuffy as if it was going to split open. Even breathing felt a dull pain. She was going to Yuchi. Once she found out about everything, he had no idea what she would think or how she would feel. He still wanted to stay here to get married. Crown Prince, please take the bride out of the sedan chair, the matchmaker said loudly. The people behind her laughed and pushed Gong Che to the sedan chair. They even lifted the curtain of the sedan chair. He only needed to reach out. Su Miaolon saw the red men's boots embroidered with golden dragons and was very shy. She raised her hand so that he could help her out of the sedan chair. But Gong Che didn't move at all. He stared at her hand as if he was looking at another person. Seeing the crown prince in a daze, the matchmaker couldn't help but smile. She said, "Your Highness, are you stunned? This is your crown princess. She's the real one. Why don't you take her out and take her back to the palace?" Su Miaolon was even more shy. Her raised hand hung in the air, waiting for Gong Che to reach out. "No, this isn't my crown princess. My crown princess shouldn't be her." Out of the blue, Gong Che thought to himself. Then he suddenly turned around and pointed his spear at a tall steed beside the palanquin. He leaped onto the steed and galloped out of the city. Before Su Miaolon could come back to her senses, there was an earth-shattering clamor outside. Everyone was stunned, so much so that her raised hand was numb, and no one helped her out. What happened? Why did the person in front of her suddenly leave? Where was the crown prince? At this time, the matchmaker suddenly exclaimed, "The crown prince ran away from the wedding." Chapter 419. Running away from the marriage? How could this be? Su Miaolon pulled off her veil and ran out, but how could she still see him? At that moment, her expression twisted crazily, and then she yelled at the person beside her. "Are you dead? Why aren't you chasing after him?" Beside the sedan were the guards sent by the Marquis Jinggua's estate. The scene just now had already scared him silly. When he heard his young Mrs. Sharp voice, he woke up from his dream and hurriedly led people to chase after him. At this time, someone thought of reporting to the emperor. In short, the palace gate was in a mess, and it was very chaotic. The common people didn't understand what had happened. When the chaos gradually calmed down, a child's voice suddenly sounded. "Mother, was she abandoned?" The woman behind her quickly covered her mouth and ran away without waiting for the officials and nobles to react. But the child's words seemed to open up the people's chaotic minds, and they suddenly became clear. The crown prince ran away from the marriage because he was dissatisfied with the crown princess. Tithegiske, the so-called #1 beauty in the capital, couldn't even keep a man in check and abandoned the marriage in public. Some people's eyes were even more direct and full of mockery. The Marquis Jinggua always considered himself as the future father-in-law of the crown prince and offended many people. Now, it was all because of his daughter? Some people even maliciously thought that Su Miaolon was always so arrogant. Now that she was exposed in public, it was really satisfying. Although they didn't say it clearly, there were always some whispers. In addition to those terrifying eyes, Su Miaolon, who had pulled off her veil, was so ashamed that she couldn't show her face. Her beautiful face twisted, and she wanted to sew the mouths of everyone around her. Why did the crown prince run away from the marriage? Was he really dissatisfied with her? If she couldn't be the crown princess, it wouldn't be a matter of shame. She might as well die. Seeing her face turn green and white, it was very scary. Many people laughed. It turned out that the so-called #1 beauty in the capital was just like this. They were really blind to chase after her in the beginning. At this time, the matron of honor trembled forward. "Young miss, you should go back to the sedan. His Highness the Crown Prince probably has something urgent and will be back soon." Uncontrollable laughter came from the crowd. No one knew what kind of urgent matter it was that the Crown Prince would leave the bride behind on such a big day. Su Miaolon glared at the matron of honor with resentment. She was so scared that she didn't dare to speak. Su Miaolon thought that the matron of honor must have said something that angered the crown prince. Otherwise, Why would the crown prince run away from the wedding without any warning? It's all because of this matron of honor. What's going on? The first one to come out of the palace was the Duke of Jinghua. He missed his daughter so much that he walked in front of the emperor. Seeing the chaos at the palace gate, the Marquis's face turned ashen. "Where's the crown prince?" "Father!" Su Miaolon couldn't bear it any longer. She threw herself into the Marquis' arms and sobbed. She felt wronged. At this time, the emperor also came over. When he came, everyone had to kneel. The emperor impatiently shouted, "What are you kneeling for? Where's the crown prince? Didn't he come out to escort the bride? Where is he?" No one dared to answer the question. After all, that was the crown prince, the future emperor. Su Miaolon said while sobbing, "Your Majesty, His Highness the Crown Prince, he might have something urgent. So he left." "What?" The emperor was shocked. "That bastard," he scolded as he hurriedly sent the imperial army to find him. Seeing his furious appearance, Su Miaolon quickly broke free from her father and knelt in front of the emperor. "Your Majesty, if His Highness the Crown Prince doesn't like Miaolon, then please don't blame His Highness for this. His Highness must have been misled by someone to do such a thing." She was sure that the only person who could influence Gongche was Gong Yimo, so she deliberately said this to divert the trouble. If she didn't have a good time, then everyone else wouldn't have a good time. "What are you talking about? You're his wife. What can be more important than you? Get up." "No. Miaolon is too ashamed to be a human. It's better to die." "Miaolon?" The Marquis shouted sadly. His face was full of anger and forbearance. The emperor looked at Su Miaolon's tearful face, and the anger in his heart reached its peak. "Go back to the sedan chair," the emperor ordered. "But—" Su Miaolon raised her delicate and pitiful face and looked at him. "Even if I have to catch him, I will bring him back to marry him. Go back to the sedan chair. I will let him come and welcome you into the palace," the emperor said through gritted teeth. Su Miaolon seemed to be frightened by him. She quietly returned to the sedan chair, but her heart was relieved. It was fine as long as the emperor was willing to make the decision for her. Not to mention the chaos here, on the outskirts of the city, Gong Yimo could still hear the noise from the city even after walking far away. She couldn't help but shake her head and prepare to speed up. "M.O.R." Gong Yimo was stunned. She seemed to have heard Gong Che calling her, but how was that possible? At this time, he should be welcoming the bride. So Gong Yimo only paused for a moment and continued to walk forward. "M.O.R." Gong Yimo turned around and her expression turned solemn. She didn't hear wrongly. It was Gong Che's voice. But why was Gong Che not going to perform the wedding ceremony? Why was he here? She led the horse and turned around, only to see a fiery red figure quickly approaching. It really was Gong Che. He actually came wearing a wedding robe. Because he ran too fast, Gong Che's hair was a bit messy. But when he saw Gong Yimo was still there, his eyes suddenly burst with an astonishing brilliance. His whole person was alive. At this time, he was wearing a luxurious wedding robe. Even the horse under him was tied with red silk. He didn't look like he was here to chase someone, but more like he was here to welcome the bride. For a moment, Gong Yimo felt as if she had returned to her previous life. It was as if he was rushing here to marry her. Only, this scene didn't happen in her previous life. But it still touched her heart and made her stop. "M.O.R." Gong Che reined in his horse and stopped beside Gong Yimo. His chest was heaving up and down violently. His jade-like face was dyed with a bright and beautiful color, especially now that he had released all of himself and was no longer suppressing it. "Don't go. Stay." On the way here, Gong Che had already thought it through. All this time, he had been enduring and retreating. It was meaningless. He still couldn't get Gong Yimo's attention and solve this matter. He should have done this long ago. He should have been like Gong Dai, pressing on step by step and not giving the other party any chance to escape. He shouldn't have married another woman so that she wouldn't be in a difficult situation and hide his feelings from the world. Gong Yimo sighed and got off the horse. Gong Che also jumped off the horse and looked at her with a burning gaze. Anyway, she already knew that he loved her. You didn't want to hide it anymore? You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.